Hello, everyone, and thanks for giving us your time today for VR Download. I'm Ian Hamilton in New York, joined by David Heaney in London in the UploadVR studios as we talk about the next steps in personal computing. Oops, let me fix my audio here. Why is that passing through? Sorry about that. Let me start over there. We're wearing Quest 3 headsets today with last generation Meta avatars. We're using hand tracking and built-in microphones. We've got tablets in front of us that show us notes and comments so we can interact with our audience when we're live. Thank you to our patrons for supporting the work we do over on UploadVR.com. In case this is your first time here, you can become a paying member at UploadVR.com to support our work directly. We thank our patrons by name here on this podcast and listed on the website. That includes XR Developer News, Podum, Holonet, Justin Corcoran, Richard Meller, Parmesan, Nick Levac, Qubits, Steve Lucas, David Wyatt, DePonch, and Soul Presence. Sincerely, all of you, thank you for your support. Hello to everyone out there. Please feel free to share where you're watching us from. And hello to our time travelers catching us at different times or speeds. And those of you watching us through a universal translator of some kind into their native language. David, what do we have today?
Hello, everyone. Great to see you again. Apologies for the delay, but I'm finishing up the Meta Ray-Ban display review, and we're preparing our reviews of Galaxy XR and Apple Vision Pro M5. So, it's very difficult to get everything sorted, but we're going to try and bring you the best possible reviews of these glasses and headsets that we can. So today, we're going to first start by talking about Galaxy XR. As Ian will explain, he was able to borrow one from a developer for the weekend, and he has put out multiple articles on UploadVR.com that you should go and read. We'll first talk about how Galaxy XR is more open than Quest, having on-device sideloading and open bootloader. It also has a somewhat hidden USB-C port that can connect accessories and hubs, and that's in addition to its external battery. So you're bringing in power through the battery and then data on that USB-C port. Ian will then tell you why, in his view, Google Maps is the best software included with Galaxy XR, and he'll also tell you about how in Android XR there's an APK for that. With this on-device sideloading and a lot of the other aspects of the OS, Ian will tell you how it kind of delivers on the promise of standalone spatial computing in many ways, and how for many of the things where on a Quest he would need to use a phone, the Meta Horizon mobile app, or an Apple Vision Pro, he would need to connect a Mac. For many of these tasks, it was all possible on Android XR. And so, again, Ian will tell you more about that from his experience. I should be receiving a Galaxy XR in the next few days, and then beginning my review of that. We'll then discuss Vimeo adding support for Apple Immersive Video. It was the first major platform to add support for spatial video. Now it's getting Apple Immersive Video by the end of this year. We'll then discuss VRChat, now getting a full release on iPhone, iPad, and flat screen Android. That comes after 2 years now of alpha and beta testing, but it's fully available in the Google Play Store and App Store now for flat screen mobile use. We will then discuss Magic Leap. Its Google partnership has been extended by 3 years, and in an event in Saudi Arabia, they showed off a HUD glasses prototype. And so we'll talk about how Magic Leap has kind of moved from a headset company to a technology supplier. Its goal there is to kind of provide the waveguide technology for other companies to make integrated headsets that use Google software. We'll dig into that. Finally, we will talk about Meta Reality Labs, the division of Meta that I used to refer to by its two subdivisions, Metaverse and Wearables. Well, some of the news is that has been restructured. It's now Metaverse, Wearables, and Horizon OS, from 2 subunits to 3. We'll talk about that. We'll also talk about its Q3 earnings report, where Reality Labs revenue is up 74%, but there's a reason for that, and we'll dig into that. It's related to retailers stocking up their Quest 3 S headsets for the holidays to meet demand. We'll also talk about Quest V83 PTC, or should I say Horizon OS, v83 PTC, because it has that evolved Horizon OS system UI that Meta teased at Connect. And one of the features of it that I think a lot of Quest headset owners are going to really appreciate is that worlds are no longer in your app library. There's now a dedicated worlds tab. Your app library, once you get this Evolve Navigator, is just your apps, not Horizon Worlds anymore. Well, technically you will see the Horizon Worlds app, but you will not see individual worlds in there. So yeah, a lot to talk about. And I think our first section is Galaxy XR. So if you want to get into that, Ian, will we start with the news stuff and then get on to talk about your impressions?
Let's see here. How do we want to approach this in particular? I'm looking at the comments here. I wanted to talk about some of the comments here. So people are talking about Quest games, and I saw some discussion on just the expectation that maybe investment in games in VR is waning inside the Meta ecosystem. I think we'll discuss that during that last section and whether that is the case. But I'm seeing that discussion there in the comments, so I thought I'd just mention that we see you out there discussing that sort of overall premise, and I think we'll dive into that in that last section of the show. But first is Galaxy XR, yeah.
Sure. So I'll just run through some of the details here that are related to your impressions, and then you can get straight into your impressions. So before Android XR entered the market in Galaxy XR, the two major standalone platforms were Apple's Vision OS and Meta's Horizon OS. And Meta's Horizon OS is a lot more open than Apple's Vision OS for sure. But now Android XR has arrived to be even more open. And it's kind of interesting because Meta executives, including Mark Zuckerberg, were presenting Horizon OS as the open alternative to Apple. But yet Android XR has arrived. And in fact, Zuckerberg and the other executives were at times describing Horizon OS as, the Android of XR. But now we have Android XR as the Android of XR. It's almost quite confusing to distinguish between, terminologies here. So what do we mean when we say that Galaxy XR is more open than a Quest headset? Well, firstly, it has on-device sideloading, and you don't even need to be in a developer mode. So if you want to sideload an APK to your Quest, you have to first enable developer mode, and that requires going onto Meta's website and clicking a tick box and giving them either your credit card details or your phone number as a verification step. Then you have to sideload at least your first APK from a PC or technically an Android phone, but for most people, a PC. So yes, you can install your first APK could be an app that then lets you install further APKs in the headset on device, but at least that first one has to be, through the PC. And as I just mentioned, you have this kind of server-side developer mode you got to enter. What's different on Galaxy XR? So on Galaxy XR, you can enter developer mode just like you can on an Android phone. Anyone here who has an Android phone will be familiar with this. You just go into settings and you kind of tap the build number 10 times in a row, right? That's similar to any Android phone. From there, you can then just give your web browser, Google Chrome, for example, permission to install unknown apps. And all of this is on the headset. None of this requires taking off the headset. And from now on, you go to Google Chrome, you download the APK, and you install it. That's it. You got on-device sideloading. And this is a screenshot from Ian's time in Android XR. The other aspect that makes it more open is that the bootloader is open. So you can unlock the bootloader on Galaxy XR and in theory, even install a different operating system. Now, in theory is the key part there because today, as of 2025, there are no like operating systems that you can install on your Galaxy XR. But in theory, we could see an open source project next year that figures it out, and you could even have people kind of modify Android XR if they're very, very savvy with this kind of thing. Again, the difference between in theory and in practice here is big, but the openness aspect is there. You've got on-device sideloading, developer mode without server-side registration, and an open bootloader. So you have the situation where Vision OS, again, Meta's not the most closed here. Meta's kind of the middle ground. Android XR is the open, and on Vision OS you can't sideload at all, other than your own compiling application as a developer from Xcode. Right? That's fundamentally required for any development. In Xcode, you have your own project, you compile it, and it goes to your headset. But that's not the same thing as being able to sideload. The closest equivalent on Apple would be Test Flight, but that's kind of still done through Apple's App Store system. It's limited to, I think, 10,000 testers, something like that. And then there are obviously still Apple restrictions there. So it's very, very fascinating that we now have this kind of 3 tiers of openness in the market.
Yeah, and I saw someone in our comments, everyone's talking about all the possibilities here, but Arlen, maybe someone needs to build an XR OS from a raw Linux build with a full open source release. Sal mentioning, I don't think it will be one size fits all, considering the reaction to Galaxy XR, Play for Dream, and Big Screen Beyond 2. And then I love Patapon's comment saying, now we just need to be able to load Android XR onto the Quest headsets, which gets us into some really interesting discussions about who needs who here and who has the more developed overall platform and who everyone is going to use in the future. Let's go through these. I guess this one first, right?
Yeah, sure. I just want to touch on what you said there, because I think that is very, very important, right? What will matter from the typical non-enthusiast, non-developer user's perspective, from which is open, is on a market perspective, which headsets adopt it, right? Today, as of today, one hardware maker provides Android XR, Samsung, and one hardware maker provides Horizon OS, Meta. But Meta has obviously, stated that Asus and Lenovo are building Horizon OS headsets. As recently as a couple of months ago, Lenovo had their conference where they, mentioned, we're working on Horizon OS headsets. We've seen some potential leaks from Asus, but there's no announcement there since the initial kind of tease. Google has officially announced that X-Rail's Project Aura will use Android XR, of course. They've also said that Sony and Lynx are working on devices. Lynx teased something last month, but we'll have to see. I think it's all up in the air right now. And it is going to be fascinating to see the competition here between Horizon OS and Android XR. Some of the meta side relation of this discussion we'll get into later. But I wonder, how much does this extended openness matter? How much does the Google ecosystem matter? How much does the Google Play Store matter versus how much does Meta's advantages matter? Like, ironically, given a lot of our discussion is Meta giving up on gaming? Right now, if you had, a like for like hardware, right now hardware is one of the factors. But if you ruled that out, and what I mean by that is, if there was an Android XR headset that was basically a Quest 3, and there was a Horizon OS headset that was basically a Galaxy XR, so your decision was not about hardware anymore at all. It was just about software. The advantage Meta has is games, right? It actually is gaming, which is really strange because obviously we're so deep in the VR world that for us, every little pullback or perceived pullback from Meta is a withdrawal from gaming. But, there's no Asgard's Wrath 2 or Batman Arkham Shadow or Deadpool on Android XR. That Google has announced nothing other than, Inside Job, the kind of little mini game that's pre-installed from Alchemy Labs. You've got Job Simulator and such, and you've got cross-platform titles like Walkabout Mini Golf. But, that's fascinating here, that it is Meta's actual advantage here is gaming, which is something I don't think anyone would have predicted a couple of years ago.
It's interesting, yeah, and I think of, there's a comment here saying, where is it? I don't see a future for Horizon OS. And just to our regular commenters, Google changed, I think you're aware of this, but YouTube changed whether they're showing us your username or your account name. So some of you, if you have a different name that we usually call out you by, we may not recognize that as we're looking through our comments here. But yeah, I do see this comment of, I really don't see a future for Horizon OS. Who wants that in a couple of years just because it has some games and an okay-ish social world? There was the mention of Citadel being a really, a couple people in our comments are liking Citadel on Horizon Worlds. And there are some destinations that people kind of are starting to come around to as finding interesting on Horizon Worlds. but
But it's not a headset seller.
nothing. Yes, and then I was going to say, as they move on to whatever's next, I've made this argument in the past of just the Quest Plus subscription program being the one thing of value that Meta is going to take into whatever it builds next. You should be able to, when you buy the touch controllers for whatever Meta builds next, you should get the best of the Quest library bundled with those controllers. And that's an obvious match made in heaven.
Yeah, that gaming library is kind of their biggest, unique selling point. The other one that we do need to point out, though, is the Microsoft partnership. We don't really bring this up enough, but again, today on Quest 3, it's a 2K per eye LCD headset. So it's not a massive use case, but if you imagine Meta coming out with a 3K or 4K micro OLED headset, we don't know what resolution the ultralight headset will be next year. I've actually seen a few people already on Galaxy XR who've gone from a Quest 3 who use this feature saying, damn, I missed this. I missed the ability to, of course, you can do it with virtual desktop, but then that becomes your entire app. The great thing about the Horizon OS multitasking approach to this, as I mentioned when we discussed, this ultra-wide feature is, I can bring this up in VRChat. I can bring this up in any VR game. I can pick my virtual world and bring up my monitor. So I wonder how much that matters. There are other obviously minor aspects. The James Cameron partnership was announced as an exclusive partnership. We know that Meta is talking to Disney and A24, and of course Blumhouse. The Blumhouse stuff is already coming out. So I wouldn't underestimate the scale of Meta's investment here. It is absolutely true to say, though, of course, that the Google Play Store is a massive, massive advantage for Google. But Meta does have its own advantages, and I think it's going to be more competitive than people think. There are people already declaring Horizon OS is done, it's dead, there's no way it can compete. Let's see how this plays out. I think this is going to be a lot more interesting, and of course it will be, right? Who wants to watch a sports game where you already know which team's going to win? I don't think this is going to be like this. I think don't underestimate the scale of investment that Meta will put into here now that it has real competition.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting to think of just they've built a platform from the ground up with testing. Like we're on version 81. I see in our comments how everyone in the comments is beginning like, how do I get the latest navigator? Is that on PTC? So like you and our comments are still hankering for the latest version of Meta software. And they're not even at version 100. And in the back of my mind, I've always wondered, like, are they just building to version 100 just to launch what they actually envision as a personal computer in VR? Like every version up to 100 is just, we're building Horizon OS on this path and it's not actually complete yet. And we're all complaining about the fact that it isn't complete week after week.
Yeah. And I mean, look, their $500 headset from 2023 is not their competitor to Vision Pro and Galaxy XR. It's the headset that we have reported, that the Wall Street Journal has reported, that the information has reported Meta is planning to launch next year, right? And just to be clear for people who aren't aware, our sources and the outlets I just mentioned as well. Sorry, I had to clear my throat. Our sources and their sources indicate that next year, Meta plans to launch an ultralight headset with an open periphery design and a compute puck tethered that is running Horizon OS. So the idea is that this thing is much more optimized for these virtual screens use cases. They're going to keep building on that Microsoft partnership and make it easier and better to connect your Windows 11 PC in one click with multitasking, ultra-wide mode, all that kind of stuff. They want to have 3D movies and immersive content through the James Cameron partnership. We've seen, Luna do a lot of data mining of Horizon OS that indicates that this thing is going to have not just eye tracking for gaze and pinch, but also iris unlock, a lot of these features. So again, I think we really need to see what does it look like when there's hardware parity? What does this market look like when there are cheap Android XR headsets and premium Horizon OS headsets? Right now, there's too much confusion between the hardware and the software to really know what the competition is here.
Well, now it's a good time to probably walk through some of my hands-on, or at least how I approached my hands-on
Sure.
here. Are we ready to talk about that here?
Yeah, I just want to quickly mention that USB-C port that you find, and then we can get straight into that because I really want to hear that, and I think our audience really wants to hear that as well. Let's just quickly note the existence of that cool little USB-C port. If you can find the image.
Yeah, I'll go look for the image right now.
Yeah. So Samsung Galaxy XR, as well as having the tethered battery that you're used to. I find the image here. The tethered battery that you're used to for power. And to be clear, just like Apple Vision Pro, if you want to use these headsets indefinitely, you just plug the battery into a power socket, right? The concern over battery life for these headsets that are designed to be used seated is, I think, comes from people who haven't used them. I use the Vision Pro plugged in to a power socket more than I use it portable, right? Portable matters for room scale gaming, of course, the onboard battery. When you're walking around the room, you don't want any tether of any kind to a wall. But if you're sitting watching a movie or doing productivity, you're probably beside a power socket anyway. Even on an airplane, there's not a flight that I've been on in the past like 2 years that hasn't had some sort of power socket, like when I was over for Galaxy XR. So that's the power side is sorted, right? What this is a separate USB port that you can use for data and accessories and hubs. And Ian, why don't you tell us a little bit, before we get into your kind of software impressions, why don't you tell us a little bit about the things that you've been able to do with this USB port?
Yeah, so this image alone tells some of the story. So if for those of you who don't have this image up on your screen, it's what I've termed a cyber selfie. So I'm taking a screenshot from the Galaxy XR headset, and I have a webcam pointed back at the headset that is connected to a USB hub over here. The USB hub has 3 connections on it, and I think an extension cord in order for it to not add any weight to my headset. So the extension cord is running around to the port that David just showed on the right band of the headset. And then I've got this hub here with Ethernet running into it, a chromatic USB video source, and then a webcam. And then what I did in Android XR was I pulled up one UVC app that could read a camera input over USB. That's what's bringing in the chromatic screen that's in my handheld. And then the second UVC camera app inside of Android is running over here, and it's taking the feed from a second camera that's connected to this USB hub. And then, of course, there's Ethernet on the end of this USB hub because there's a special, Ethernet port on this dedicated USB hub. And then I've got all of that running simultaneously into my headset, and I'm sitting there with a keyboard typing out what I'm experiencing on this keyboard using this mouse. I've got the controllers over here. I published an article, the article that you're reading about this, using Wi-Fi off. So I'm using Bluetooth on to connect to my local peripheral accessories. I'm using USB over wired connection to connect to all of my weird little gadgets to experiment how they work. And then I'm using a wired internet connection to the internet to operate all of this, just to kind of prove that I can, just to see where the limits are of all this. And it performed remarkably well through basically what I threw at it in the course of this testing. I didn't go crazy with it. I didn't add 6 devices and see what that could do. I didn't do every variation. But there's an image. I don't know where it ended up, but it's this chromatic here is a remarkable little device for exploring some of these things because it's such a low power device. It can take its power over USB-C with very little needed. So just plugging this thing, the chromatic, directly into the USB port of the Galaxy XR headset, it takes its power and sends its video in both directions, even over a very, very small data stream. So you can be sitting there with this Game Boy in your hand while its video is coming into your headset. And it's a remarkable moment to see your headset lending its power to an external device. And I've had this moment before on Quest, and I've had this moment before on Vision Pro, but it wasn't like this. And the reason it wasn't like this is because uh, the hoops I had to jump through on Quest to make it happen, and the hoops I had to jump through on Apple Vision Pro to make it happen. To pay $300 to add a USB port to my Vision Pro, had to figure out a whole different way of routing in power. So this USB hub, for those who aren't familiar with how this works, um, this USB hub that I'm using for this test has a port on it that says PD on it, and that's for power delivery in. You take a USB-C port that has a very high amount of power coming out of the wall. You put that into the PD port, and now whatever device you've got attached to this can receive power, um, a large amount of power over it. Well, on the Quest, you need to use that PD port along with all the rest of the things in order to get power into the headset while all of this other data is coming in. And then you have to use an app it says it's for HDMI in order to bring in this differently formatted video thing. But this is the image that I was talking about with David. For those of you who can't see, this is a very long USB-C port going from the hidden USB-C port on the headset all the way over to the Chromatic, and the Chromatic is taking its power from that USB-C port. So here's a battery pack over here that's ultimately supplying all the power in the system you're seeing, and it's running over to the left-hand side of the Galaxy XR headset, and then drip feeding basically the mod retro Chromatic. And then while it's simultaneously doing that, this Chromatic can be feeding its video back out over that port in through the USB-C port. This is my go-to example now for just proving your system is open in this way, right? I can put a Game Boy camera on this and have a webcam directly out of the mod retro Chromatic. It's less than 1 megapixel. It's silly how low resolution it is, but it's a game cartridge that's also a webcam, and it works in scenarios like this on other headsets. So here's my Quest 3 example of the very same scenario, and then I can do the exact same thing on Vision Pro with its extra $300 USB port. It's just a wonderful proof of concept, and there's actually new cartridges being made for this device all the time. So there's really interesting things that are potentially capable down the road if someone makes like a Game Boy camera with interchangeable lens system and actual modern sensors. You could potentially have this as your webcam if you really wanted to. And then the use that I had 3 weeks ago that was fundamental here, in this studio, right? I need to keep an eye on my physical reality. It's mission critical that I do. It's actually really useful to take a webcam, point it at some aspect of your environment, and then have that webcam in your headset as sort of a rear view camera or security cam for reality. And just fantastic to get this to work in Android XR so easily.
Yeah, I just want to linger on the difference here between Galaxy XR and Apple Vision Pro, this being the $300 USB-C port for Vision Pro. So it costs as much as a Quest 3S to add a USB-C port to your Vision Pro. And, correct me if I'm wrong, it's only available if you're paying the $100 a year Apple developer license as well.
Yep, absolutely brutal, absolutely devastating. But also, I'm an Apple developer now. Right? It worked.
USB port. Yeah. So yeah, very interesting stuff. Let's move on to talk about your thoughts on Google Maps. I almost called it Google Earth VR because in many ways it is Google Earth VR brought to standalone with a kind of flat screen maps interface that you can change to at any time. And I think that's one of the things you really like about Google Maps on Android XR. You noted this all the way back 10 months ago when you tried Galaxy XR when it was called Project Muhan, when it was just announced, right? You got to try it. You weren't allowed to take photos and videos back then, but you were blown away by Maps. In my time, I played with Maps during my short time with Galaxy XR. I think, why don't you tell us about why you think this is the best kind of built-in software in the headset?
Yeah, It's amazing. This is the finest of Google. It's always been the finest of Google. It's the real power of virtual reality. Google Earth VR is for some people the cornerstone VR experience for them. You go back into the history books, you have things like Fantastic Contraption and Tilt Brush and Google Earth, none of which put guns in your hands and had you shoot other virtual characters. These were exploratory experiences of the medium, and they convinced a lot of people that the medium was here as something really substantial. And here I am within, I did the way we've ordered things here today is very much the way I kind of explored the system and the weight of the way I explored the system. So first I'm like, what can I do with these crazy USB-C ports? And then after that, I'm trying to see what's built in and how good it is. And Google Earth or Google Maps, yeah, blew me away. And what's confusing here is there is a Google Earth app, flat screen that you can interact with, and like it's got controls for hand controls as you look at it. But you get into this, and you start feeling uh, native interactions for hand tracking that are easy to pick up within a minute or less, and you're immediately gesturing across the world. It's using some combination of letting you target at spots on the ground that you want to look at, and then you pinch on it to grab it. You pinch with the other finger to grab another spot that you're sort of looking at on the ground. And those are your grapple holds on Earth. And you start pulling yourself around them. So this is your rotate gesture, and this is your pinch and zoom gesture. And I just showed you how to use Google Maps. And correct me if I'm wrong, if I'm misrepresenting the input system here, and I'm just offhand recalling how to interact with this app. And it's magic. I can't remember if there was a index finger gesture. But I start off with it teaching me how to use these gestures. I go straight to New York. I go straight back out to Space View, and then I go straight back into Los Angeles. And I'm using, like, Google has done so much work that we largely just ignore with how you highlight certain landmarks at certain zoom distances when you're looking at it in certain times. So Google Flat is fantastic at this. It's the best in the market, obviously. But here you're doing the same thing where you zoom in to a certain zoom level and then give it a second or two and some of the landmarks start popping up, or you need to zoom out a little bit and the landmarks start popping up. I get to Los Angeles here and I go straight to the I can't think of the name offhand, but the observatory, the Griffith Observatory. And I go to it because I've been in Los Angeles. I know California. I know what the road is like to go up there. I know how I have to compete. Like, I've done that trip since I was a kid, with family. I've done it as an adult. And you have to park a long ways away and then sometimes walk up this long windy road if the parking lot is too full, if there's too many tourists at this location. You go up there and you zoom in. It's not street view level, but I'm looking at it as if I'm in maybe a helicopter in Grand Theft Auto, and I'm positioning myself just right, and I'm having memories of exactly where I was when I was 4 years old in this location, pointing right at it. And I'm having memories of where I was when I was 25 years old in this same location. And then I'm taking these two gestures and I'm rotating around and I'm starting to look for the Hollywood sign because I know exactly where I was in that physical location at two different points in time. And I know where the Hollywood sign is relative to it. So I'm rotating around the world. I'm zooming out and I'm like, where is it? Where is it? And then Google resolves it for me. It does that little pop in landmark thing after a few seconds of just looking around and zooming to the right detail. Boom, it says, that's where the Hollywood sign is. And I go, oh, cool. And I do the pinch thing and I zoom in on it instantaneously. Like, it's like as if it's as I didn't break down how exactly Google is doing the targeting of what you're looking at, but it's as if they took the Vision OS gaze pinch system, but applied it to all of your physical geometry of the planet Earth. And whatever you're looking at is where you start to target with your hand, and it just works effortlessly for navigating hundreds of miles of landscape. Also, it vignettes every time you move. So the immersive view of whatever mapping you have, it gets to be about this field of view of what you're looking at when you're extremely moving fast. Outside of that, you see a nice gridded landscape that keeps you grounded in the world. This is the same idea that the best VR developers over the years have deployed to keep you comfortable despite doing crazy amounts of movement. And here's Google doing it with two-handed gestures. It's just phenomenal work.
Yeah, I mean, as a lot of the commenters are pointing out, Google Earth VR was and is one of the highlights of PC VR. So having it officially available on standalone is great to see. Some people are bringing up that there are third-party apps on Quest and Vision Pro that are quite similar, World Lens VR and World, for example, and they are using Google's API that lets developers build similar experiences. Couple of subtle differences, though. One is that this is a kind of hybrid app, so it starts as a flat screen window that you can position and be doing multitasking at the same time, or in pass through and have awareness of your external environment. And then at any time you can toggle into immersive or back to flat screen. And I think that's one of the things Ian really enjoys about this app from Google. And there are other kind of polishing touches in that this is the full Google Maps experience that you get on your phone or on your browser. It's everything you get in Google Maps plus the immersive kind of Google Earth VR style thing, all in one integrated app that's, again, switching between at any time. It's got all your saved stuff, right? It's got your everything you've got saved in Google Maps as well. All of this ecosystem integration is, again, a huge advantage of Android XR. Google does have YouTube there on Quest, right? It does have Job Simulator and Vacation Simulator from its Alchemy Labs. But I wonder, are we going to see Google Maps come to Horizon OS? It seems very unlikely. And there's a direct parallel here, right? Windows Phone. So one of the things, and you can have this is a long debate we're not going to have today, but one of the things that heavily impacted the potential success of Windows Phone was Google's kind of refusal to release any apps for it. So you didn't have a YouTube app on Windows Phone, and you didn't have the Google Maps app. Now, of course, Google does release its apps on iPhone and iPad, right? But that's kind of different given their market share relative to it there. And the joke is that, even people who work on Google Pixel at Google use an iPhone. And I say that as Google Pixel owner, to be clear. But yeah, so that incorporated, it's interesting that on Vision OS, Google even doesn't make its flat screen apps available. You can't get the iPad version of most Google apps through the Apple Vision Pro's App Store, where Google only has to tick a checkbox and it would make it available. So we could see, at least for the first, however many years, Google leveraging its first-party software as a unique selling point for Android XR and kind of starving Meta and Apple of some of this. But as other commenters are bringing up, Apple Maps has a Google Earth style view on iPad and Mac and iPhone, right? So one thing we've been saying for a while now, every time there's a Vision OS update, Vision OS 2, Vision OS 26, one of the things we say we want is Apple Maps for Vision Pro. There's no reason that Apple couldn't deliver this. And I think it's interesting that Apple hasn't done so yet. Maybe that's a flagship feature of Vision OS 27.
Yeah. It's a tall task to do what Google's done with real world mapping data, to kind of zoom in on Central Park. So my very first in the video, so I encourage you to go find our video on YouTube or not, go read the article, which has the video embedded inside of it. My first 8 minutes, basically learning the gestures and doing this. But I go to the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York, in Central Park, basically. And there's a rooftop garden area where you can look over Central Park and the beautiful buildings beyond it. And I went to that location in Google Earth to try to see, or Google Maps to see what it was like. And I'm looking around going, this isn't quite as affecting as actually going to this spot. But if I wanted to convey to someone the view you can get from here, if you go to the Metropolitan Museum of Art and you find this very specific location that's like reached by going on two elevators inside of this building, and you get this incredible view. Well, I could tease that view or show what it'll look like. And the example that I just gave, it's funny, like they just closed that, I think for a couple of years now. So you can't actually get the view that I just teased in reality anymore until they reopen the location. But that's one example of a billion examples of where people can go into this mapping app and find some understanding of their space around them that they didn't have otherwise. I want to talk about Not Suspicious's comment when we get a second.
Sure. I just want to bring up Jadranko VR Catalan's comment again. We are not responsible for YouTube changing to usernames rather than kind of the display names. So it's kind of hard to remember who everyone is. But the comment here was about these third-party apps that I'm talking about that are available on Quest and on Vision Pro. And it's a great comment because it points out the real big disadvantage, which is that API that they're using to build this Google Earth-like experience is not free. Obviously, Google is not a charity. So that API costs money. And so these developers are figuring out, how do we monetize? Some of them are doing subscription fees. Some of them are doing paid features. Some of them, if you're free user, you only get a certain resolution. So it's not as, high detail as Google Maps. And there's always going to be an advantage to being the company that actually has the data that is providing it. Google can provide it for free through their own services in a way that if you're using the API, you're not. So, again, we want to always point out that yes, there are third-party apps that do this, but there is something lost by not being the actual kind of maker of the actual platform itself.
Yeah, and just I think I've told this story on podcasts past, but uh, Google Maps wrapped inside of Apple's wrapper, whatever it was, inside the original iPhone, was a life-changing experience for me in college. It was it's a silly now, but I got drunk one night with my college friends and we used the Google Maps to basically find our hotel going across New York. And there's a whole nother bit of that story of just being the only person in the room with a smartphone with the full internet and Google Maps was life changing in about 2007. That's when the beginning of the mobile revolution really started to take off. That's when Android reformed itself around what Apple had just done. And you see these apps just rolling out left and right in really fundamental ways. It's unimaginable for you to have a phone today without Google Maps on it. And there's like a subset of Apple users that don't let Google Maps on their phone. And that's the only example of like a person who doesn't have Google Maps. So my point is, yes, we talk about these third-party options, but it's so important that it be provided directly by this provider. And I need something that's a combination of all of these things that we talk about. And so that's why I need to talk about Not Suspicious's comment here. Just like with the Vision Pro, I was skeptical when I saw the Galaxy XR keynote. It seemed just like another Quest Pro, but as I've looked into it, I've been more and more impressed. So I think there might have been another comment from Not Suspicious, but Not Suspicious has two very interesting apps that we're paying attention to. They have Airspace Defender and then Banners and Bastions. And both of these apps sit inside of volumetric containers inside your environment. They don't use your whole environment. They just use a small amount of your environment as the play space for their games. So Airspace Defender is basically like Missile Command. You pinch inside of a dome to stop the missiles from coming in and destroying your cities. Very fundamental, cool idea. And we bring it up all the time because it's like Not Suspicious out there. The developer is building for the future. They're building for something that isn't widely supported right now. So you can go experience their games on a Quest headset, but you can't really super multitask while you're doing them, right? You can maybe activate seamless multitasking in the very latest versions of Horizon OS, but it's not like you can really easily go and pinch some missiles to defend your cities in this game while also watching a Netflix window over here and doing your work over here. It's just there's no system for that doing that right now. But Not Suspicious is building for that anyways. It's a very good fit for the Vision OS ecosystem. Their apps are, if they can get them ported over there, and potentially their apps are a very good fit for whatever comes next. Now, the reason I had to bring all this up is I didn't see space for Not Suspicious's apps inside of Android XR. Those two apps that I just got finished praising, there's no volumetric equivalent that I could see. I didn't experience anything like that on Android XR to Vision OS. So even though they're similar, I haven't seen that yet. Android hasn't shown the ability to have that Google Earth experience start as a volume in my space. And then maybe I say, actually, give me flat mode sometimes. I don't want you as a globe. But then I click at any point on the planet and go, take me there. And boom, it overtakes my entire environment. And then I go immersive. That's like the dream app of one experience going across all of these different scenarios. But we're still a far way from that. And like I said, these operating systems are being architected in real time with major features missing.
Yep, we always say it, and I'm sure some of our viewers get annoyed by how much we repeat it, but Vision OS is fundamentally years ahead of either Horizon OS or Android XR. The concept of the shared space with volumetric apps and windows living alongside each other in a multitasking sense where they share input, where Apple automatically handles the rendering, including the lighting, positional audio, interaction, all of this, that is not present in our experience. I'll obviously check when I get the headset if there is some sort of hidden thing, but I haven't heard any indication that there is any equivalent there on Android XR. It requires, again, a very different architecture to the whole way that the OS is built. And not everything in Vision OS works like that, as we always note, right? If you're in a full space app, it's much more like what you are used to in a Quest or Android XR here when you go into a VR experience. But in the shared space of Vision OS, the default shared space, this concept of volumes and windows living alongside each other is years ahead of any other operating system. And I really expect to see Apple keep expanding it, right? A lot of the limitations of what a volume can do are fairly arbitrary. You could imagine volumes getting the ability to move around your room and then they become virtual pets. There are lots of other reasons. And to be clear, with every Vision OS version, 2 and then 26, Apple has expanded what volumes can do, but it's frustrating that there's still kind of limitations there. Do we want to go on and talk about kind of your experience with sideloading and not needing a PC or phone in Android XR and just kind of get straight into that?
Yeah, I wanted to talk about Julian's comment out there. Did you guys get to record your M5 Vision Pro FaceTime call with Apple? No, we did not. And we're not allowed to actually quote them on anything they said to us in that briefing, which is fine. What matters is it was very informational for us, just to understand where they are. And I have to say that I actually reached out to Apple after the call to ask them on this. We weren't the only outlet briefed in spatial, right? You've seen the videos from other outlets that were able to record and share that and mark it as the first of its kind. So I actually asked Apple to try to explain this to us because they did other, as I understand it, there was like other briefings, right? But where did you have two other journalists? You had two journalists, one in London, one in New York, and you brought both of them into a briefing from public relations. That's what David and I experienced, basically concurrent to the launch of Galaxy XR. And it's a remarkable first of its kind moment that we need to just say, we had it, it happened. We had a briefing in VR, fully realized as if David was sitting right next to me as his actual persona, his actual person, like he looked like himself after I had seen him in the real world. It's we have to mark that here in comparison to what Galaxy XR is doing, because I went in and tried to animate, use the Galaxy XR avatar system, and like it was silly how the avatar, it looks more cartoonish than these avatars to go into the Galaxy XR system. And I'm like going to compare those to the personas David just showed up on the back of our screen, the ones that look photorealistic. No, like it's night and day, different worlds of experience.
Sure, but just to be very clear, Google did tell us that they plan to launch likeness, and they showed us likeness at the Galaxy XR launch event. In Android XR, in the settings, there is an avatar setting. So you choose your avatar system. Right now, it just has Samsung Galaxy avatars, but Google plans to launch likeness very soon, is what they told us, which is somewhat equivalent to this,
and
but only in a 2D window. Sorry?
So so Meta is working on codec avatars, which are their versions of this. They've been working on it for a very long time,
Yes.
and they have arguably the best technology, but it has to actually ship in headsets, and
they
it doesn't
don't
yet.
They don't Meta. The difference is Meta doesn't have a headset with even eye tracking, never mind face tracking on the market, whereas Galaxy XR and Apple Vision Pro both have eye tracking and face tracking. So we expect that headset next year from Meta will have eye tracking. We do not know if it will have face tracking at this time.
So what I am rambling here, and the reason I'm rambling is because I need to explain that I haven't done that at Meta at home or at their offices. I haven't scanned myself with a headset and then seen that avatar represented in a mirror and then talking to another person like David, right, who could compare what I look like in reality to the avatar I just scanned as a headset. David has that in his brain right now. Like it looks really good in Vision Pro, right
Yeah.
today with the current avatar technology. And the reason I'm rambling is I need to point out there's going to come a day when we do that demo that David just said is going to come from Google. We're going to scan ourselves with a phone, which is what Google said is they're ready for right now.
Yep.
So the first
Phone.
version of this is you'll scan yourself with a phone. The Meta version of that scanned with a phone technology 3 years ago was not great. They have years of progress to get to build here and to roll out in front of you, the user. But my point is, until the date starts where they actually do that on consumer shipping hardware, we can actually compare Apple giving us a briefing a couple weeks ago. We can mark that date on a calendar and say, okay, Google, when are you, sorry for just activating everyone's voice assistants. Now this is how far behind you are, Apple. Okay, Meta, this is how far behind Apple you are. It won't be long, right? They'll get this out.
The one thing we need to make so clear is that these spatial personas look much, much, much better in 3D, in VR at true scale than they do on a flat screen. It really genuinely gives you a sense of social presence. It is one of the most impressive things I've ever used was to use the Vision OS 26 personas for the first time. And to answer a question from earlier, I do have the M5 Vision Pro now. I will be starting a review in the coming days, and I will be reviewing M5 Vision Pro and Vision OS 26 as one kind of thing, and I will be including my thoughts on this. There's no other technology you can buy that makes you feel like you are in the room with another person that gets anywhere near close to spatial personas. It is one of those things that needs to be experienced to be believed, but unfortunately, you need to not only have a $3,500 headset, but the person you're calling needs to have a $3,500 headset. So it's going to be a long time until we get there. A comment here from Julian saying it's public info now that we're using that they're using Gaussian splats in case you guys were avoiding saying it. Not only were we not avoiding saying it, we were the first to report it. If you go back and look at our Vision OS 26 coverage from WWDC 25, you will find in our article the technical detail that this is powered by Gaussian splatting. UploadVR was first. We're not getting credit for it because apparently nobody noticed, but we did do that first, actually. Okay, do we want to talk about your impressions now of Galaxy XR and sideloading?
Yes, I got to talk about Roodles. I love our commenters though, all right? And I don't want my avatar to look like I do. I want it to look like a demigod. I like that. We need both. I need one to look like myself to transport me, the human that I am, to other people. And also I want to turn that off for about 4 hours and go as some other creature into the woods, right? Like I want to do both those things in VR. All right. let's
The Android
let's talk about
XR
APK for
approach.
that, right?
That's why I like the Android XR approach. In the settings, you go into settings, and avatars is one of the sections of the settings. And in the build that we were shown at the Galaxy XR launch event, there were two options: Samsung Galaxy Avatar or Google Likeness, and you just toggle them. It's a radio button. You toggle them, and then you can change. So nobody's forcing you to look like yourself. You can be a fantastical avatar. In theory, someone else. We need to get the details of this, and we'll bring you it when we get them. But in theory, someone else can build another avatar system for Android XR that you choose as your third option, and then you can utilize that. So we'll get into the details of that when we have them. But that's what Mark Zuckerberg has talked about for Meta. It's not the codec avatars are going to replace the Meta expressionist avatars. They're going to be another option. But for you in certain situations, you want to be this fantastical creature. But for a lot of people, if they're especially talking to loved ones who they know in real life, they want to see them look like they do. And businesses need it too, right? One of the reasons that Horizon Workrooms utterly flopped, other than just Quest Pro, and we can get into this another time, but was that businesses don't want to look like cartoons when they show up to have a serious meeting about strategy that could be involving millions or billions of dollars.
I'm remembering the courthouse COVID video. I am not a cat.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah, that's a
I
perfect
remember,
example. But yeah,
they had the Animoji on Apple that immediately lets you turn yourself into poop. That was the very first thing. All right, let's talk about the APK for that and not needing a phone or PC. So I get this headset late last week from Agile Lens. They lent it to us. Very thankful for them to let us do that. They were able to put in their order at the exact right time and then get it delivered to the New York area. I went down to the holodeck in New York. So that's a space sort of maintained by or manned by Agile Lens, where they give tours of large scale free roam spaces in VR, including the Texas project that I wrote about earlier this year. So go find that one if you haven't seen it. But the Texas holodeck, Ian Hamilton would be the key terms to search for and read that big article about what they do in these very large spaces and how they get it to work with PCVR. So I get this headset from them at their office late at this location late last week. I bring it back and I go through my testing. And the remarkable thing about it is I went through this in reverse from how most of our readers and our audience would probably want to do it. The very first thing, Geek Odin, I don't know if you're out there in our audience today. It is a Friday, different day. So apologies if we missed you, virtual desktop out there. But I mean, we have an audience, including the creator of virtual desktop some weeks. And we know that our audience would be looking for that immediately. Well, I saved that for the end of my experience. The first things I wanted to do is, what can I do with this device as a standalone personal computer? I don't want to use my Mac. I don't want to use my PC. I want to just use this thing on its own. While our audience is all going to be like, what do I get out of virtual desktop? And I get that, right? So um, among the things I did in the videos or in the images I saw, I got out a Game Boy operator. Thank you for the donation from DCM. See that out. I don't know what their comment is yet. I don't know if I can read it. Just a thank you for the donation. Um, I tried to connect a Game Boy operator, so it uses an app called Playback, and that app is on Linux, it's on Mac, and it's on Windows. Well, that app or that piece of hardware can read Game Boy cartridges and it can read Game Boy Advance cartridges. So Game Boy camera, again, I can get it into a device a different way using playback, a fully featured playback app. I couldn't find this app. It did not exist officially for Android. But some Reddit thread out there had someone who had built a fork of the Linux version of this app to operate this hardware device for Android. And so I downloaded an APK to Chrome and installed it directly to the headset. And here's this little USB connected device that's now USB connecting to my headset, and it's reading the cartridge from 30 years ago that is in the system. Now, I didn't get much further than this. I didn't actually run a game or do anything, but it was actually able to read like the type of cartridge it is, the name of the cartridge this way. That is, I've dreamed of that moment. I've attempted to do it on Quest, and it's been mind-numbingly difficult. You got to go to a website with mirror images of APKs to install, hoping that no one has inserted malicious code into the APK. I put my device at risk immediately by doing this, but I kind of know what I'm doing, right? I don't really know what I'm doing, but that's what Android is, right? You can make your own mistakes with the device. You can put yourself at risk if you really want to. I did that in the exploration of these things of just installing random APKs. I installed Steam Link directly from the Steam Link website, the community website where they list the APK publicly for you to download. And then I also downloaded it from the Google Play Store. It's so the one thing I couldn't do is I tried to get SideQuest on the device. And SideQuest uses like a web installer API that's in some browsers right now, but I couldn't get it activated on the Android XR system. But that's the next step of making this whole process easier is going and getting, your files for Doom or Doom 3 off of your system, putting it on the Android XR headset, and then combining that with your modded files from Team B for whoever it is to get your game into VR. That I didn't do that yet. That didn't exist. This is the first weekend of availability, and I'm butting up against that barrier of no one has done this yet. And I'm like ready to reach out to Team Beef and try to get access to this thing. But that's in weekend one, is what I'm saying, of this hardware being on my head. It's already doing all of these things which it wasn't explicitly designed for. No one with an Android XR headset has tried this, and it's working for me in a limited capacity. It's a remarkably big moment for VR, and I loved doing that. There's more to talk about here. There was a bit of this experience I hadn't talked about, but I need to talk about bringing this back. So I did all this exploration of let's do this as a personal computer. I saw people complaining about the fact that it was a choice to use a to use a keyboard with Android XR, since you could also use a keyboard with Vision OS. And I was like comparing this non-integrated approach in Android XR to using this keyboard to this other approach on Vision. Like, point is, I could have used a keyboard throughout the entire experience on Vision OS. I used a keyboard through the entire experience on Android XR for about 4 days. I wrote 3 whole articles. I edited all my videos. I never felt like I needed my phone or my computer, except when I was walking around in the world and needed to accomplish a few tasks while walking around that were already available because I had those apps on my phone. So I had Google, I had Gmail, and I had Google Photos on my phone. That was the only time walking around New York that I'm like, oh, I need to accomplish a task really quickly here to show David something or reply to a source. And I do that on my phone, and I get back to my home and I put on the Android XR headset, and I've got endless screen real estate, and I've got all of my peripherals around me. I don't need anything else. So it was great. It was a great experience to feel that kind of openness. I described it back when Vision Pro came out. you felt digital content unlock around you after 20 minutes with Vision Pro starting to grab other devices around you. You feel that digital unlock of content inside of Android XR similarly. You suddenly realize, oh my gosh, so much more is available to me than basically Meta has been able to allow. And that's fantastic.
I think the fact that you don't need a phone for some tasks is interesting just as much as the PC, right? Because I think an example you gave is a developer gave you a code, and right now, if you want to, use a key code to get a game on Quest, you need to open the mobile app and enter it there. There are also a bunch of other random little things that you can only do in the mobile app in Quest, whereas everything that you were doing here was all on headset, right? You even from enabling developer mode, like we talked about earlier, to going onto Google Play and redeeming a code. Um, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong. Maybe they did add the ability to redeem a code on Quest. If anyone has used that, I've never spotted it on mine. Uh, I think that's fascinating. And again, the file system, the fact that you get raw access to the file system means that. So I think that it's like compared to Quest, not having to use the phone is a big thing, and then compared to Vision Pro, not having to use the Mac is a big thing because getting raw access to the file system on Android means that it is more like a PC rather than kind of Apple's lockdown approach. And I think a lot of this mirrors the conversations that happen in tech publications for traditional computing around the iPad. This decade-long debate about what is a computer and is an iPad a computer, and is an iPad Pro really a computer, or is the fundamentally mobile architecture of its operating system limiting that to never truly being the device that you need? And there's so many times I've experienced this myself, right, using Vision Pro, where there's some little thing I need to do that no developer can do because the APIs don't exist. And so I need to go and pull out the Mac and use Mac Virtual Display. Whereas in theory, I'd love to not be able to do that. So I think that's why this Android approach is interesting. Now, Android itself, to be clear, it's more open than Vision OS, and I'm bringing up iPad OS, by the way, because Vision OS is based on iPad OS, but it's still not as open as a full PC-based operating system. So that is kind of interesting that, in theory, I see commenters pointing out things like the idea of having Linux or something running on this headset through the open bootloader. That would give you even more openness, but Android, at least we can say, is a hell of a lot more open than anything we've seen so far in a standalone headset.
Yeah, so a lot of comments all over the board here. Can you do phone calls over Wi-Fi and text? So in typical Google fashion, there are multiple apps that looked like they were for calling functionality inside of the app. I think there might have been 3. I don't know. Between Meet and Chat and Phone. I don't know. I'm going off my memory here. I I didn't I wasn't impressed with the Galaxy Avatar, but ideally, the ideal dream here for demonstrating what is happening to your audience is to have a persona call to a Google or to a Galaxy Avatar call. And I'm like talking to James and our audience, trying to figure out if I could somehow manage that and record it from both ends so that you could see what it looks like. I saw someone else out there has done that great video showing you side by side the mirrors of both so you can understand what's possible and what's not with the current likenesses. But what I did was I tried calling a classmate who I had, a college classmate who I had in the Google Meet app. And I think it was Google Chat. I changed my active status in Google Chat or G Chat, whatever they call it today, just chat, whatever. I changed that status maybe a decade ago to just be VR. And I'm just letting everyone I know before 2014 in that old network I used to use for personal connection that I'm focused on VR now. I try to use that platform to call as these weird avatars to a person I haven't seen face to face in about a decade. They didn't answer on this platform because we haven't used it in years to connect. And it's one of 3 or 4 calling platforms on the thing. And I didn't see the one calling platform I really would have adored, which was Google Voice. Yet I probably could have installed it and it would have worked just as any other service.
Yeah, I think there's two things going on here. One is that, you're obviously an iPhone user who's very much so in the Apple ecosystem. So a lot of these communication platforms are not what you use. You're using, iMessage and Apple's kind of FaceTime audio and FaceTime video as your primary system. Your contacts are on your iPhone. Whereas I am obviously, as I always bring up, a Google Pixel owner who's in the Android ecosystem. So for me, when I get this headset, it's going to be interesting to see what is the integration with an Android phone. And I will tell you all about that in my review, I promise, how well this does integrate with your existing kind of Android ecosystem that you're used to. But the second thing I want to say here is that this is one of the areas we're talking about communication where Meta has the advantage, where outside the United States, the vast majority of digital communication in the sense that we're talking about now is done on WhatsApp. So you have WhatsApp directly there on Quest headsets and on their uh, smart glasses. So that's kind of a very interesting dynamic there where that has always been Google's missing thing. I saw some people brought up, like, are they going to bring back Google Plus as a joke? Google has all these services for, maps, for their browser, Google Drive, Gmail, photos, all of these things. But what they've never really been able to get, the one thing Google kind of envies from Meta is the social network, kind of the social platform. They tried with Google Buzz and Google Plus, and it just didn't work. And sure, yeah, you can use Google Meet, and some people do, but it's not really used as a kind of how do you say this, kind of like a personal system. It's much more used for businesses and professionals than by that. So yeah, it's going to be fascinating.
So there's, oh yeah, DCM. So just a donation. Thank you for that, DCM, for that donation. Settler and Waldorf out there, does it have any Samsung integration? So there's a whole Samsung section that I was able to access inside the store. So you go into the Samsung internet browser, their version of Chrome, and then you go into the extensions, and it activated the Galaxy Store. There were only two apps in the Galaxy Store. There was like a passwords manager and their TV app. But that's clearly a surface where they could add a lot more. Then there's also things in the system menu that would be both provided by Google, and there might be things provided by Samsung. But to David's point, I'm not deeply integrated in those device categories right now. I used to, and as I was talking with other people, right, like I had a Pixel 2, Pixel 1, Samsung Galaxy S8. I had several. I went out and bought the Note 4 for myself, even though I'm an iPhone user, back to get the Gear VR back in the day and have that touchpad on the side of my head. Um, like I've drifted in and out of these ecosystems over the years, and it's actually a lot of friction to dive back in, and you start encountering all of these friction points depending which ways you're diving in and out.
You just want to confirm that Samsung did
Yeah.
confirm to us that there is no hardware integration with other Samsung devices. So if you're talking about like the Ring, the Galaxy Watch, there is zero integration at this time with any other hardware devices on the Samsung ecosystem.
Do hit that like button. Let the algorithm know this is good information about what is happening in virtual reality. Is there anything I didn't cover there? I meandered, and if there's any specific questions, I'm trying to respond to them down there. I do encourage you to wait for David's hardware breakdown. I focused my experience almost exclusively on software, and I danced around hardware because it's not the appropriate amount of time to really talk about hardware and how it relates to all the other experiences that are out there. So come back for us when we get that real breakdown, but I will try to answer questions as we move on through the rest of this.
Yeah, I just want to build on what you said about ecosystems. And look, fundamentally, if you want to read more about the hardware, go back to either last week's episode or read my hands-on impressions, where I only had 25 minutes, but I do detail some of the aspects of the hardware. And as Ian said, we will be bringing you a full review of the hardware where you can get some of these details. And look, any of the questions you have, put them down below, put them in our article comments, and we'll try to cover them in the review. But I think fundamentally, if you look at these two propositions, Android XR and Vision OS, the decision of which you pick is heavily going to depend on which ecosystem you're in. Now, that doesn't mean that you can't, be an Android user and pick up a Vision Pro and have a good experience, right? I'm an Android user. I use Vision Pro as well. That's fine. But there are going to be these massive advantages to these ecosystem integrations, and they just keep improving. An example is on Vision OS, Apple does iPhone cutout now. So if you're in a VR experience and you bring up your iPhone, they will kind of pass through cutout your iPhone. It's one of the tracked categories, right? There's people. Any person that comes into the room is cut out. There's your hands and arms are always cut out, or at least the vast majority of the time, your hands and arms are cut out. Your keyboard gets cut out. The gamepad you're holding gets cut out. And the iPhone was recently added as something that gets cut out.
Someone asking, is the Netflix app really just the existing Android app? Isn't it a bad experience or not? It was a very good experience. I can't tell whether it was the stock one or not.
The same app you would run on your Android phone or tablet, but hey, why is that bad? It's much better than nothing. It's better than not having a Netflix app. That's the thing. Like, people are kind of, what's the phrase here? Beggars can't be choosers, right? And there is no Netflix app on Quest. You can use it in the browser, but you can't download anything, which is one of the reasons that I think an app really matters. Same thing with Vision Pro. You can use it in the browser, but you can't download in the browser.
Yeah, I think we always have a challenge here in what audience we're addressing. And I appreciated David's comment there of where you're in, like whether you're embedded in a particular ecosystem. Not suspicious out there. I got to call them out. If there are dev relations people in our audience for any of the major platforms, please talk to Not Suspicious out there and help them out with hardware or with any kind of support you as a platform can provide for getting their ideas onto your platform. We'll support other devs that have really inspiring ideas, but I have to talk about their app in particular as like, we're in constant communication with that particular dev. They're telling us about different steps on their journey, and their journey is indicative. Like the thing I'm hearing from them is typical of what I'm hearing from a lot of devs. They need access to hardware. They need some financial support to see their idea to fruition. And they need some dev relations person on a platform side to kind of see their vision, help them out a little bit, and get them across the finish line. And that's really tough to see. These people who have, like, maybe they've got an iPhone and they're a Mac user, but they've never used a Quest, and like they're just naturally in the Vision Pro, like they're exploring Vision Pro. That would be suicidal as a company. Like, if you didn't if you are that person, right, you're all in the Apple ecosystem all the way down, and then you go and for the first time get a VR headset and it's the Vision Pro, you are probably committing professional suicide not to familiarize yourself with what the other platforms can do in
as a developer,
to the Vision Pro one.
To be clear, are you saying as a developer?
As a developer, you're probably committing professional suicide by not familiarizing yourself with both platforms and what both offer. So what I'm trying to balance out what you were saying was, you're talking multi-$1,000 investments amongst developers to try to just port something that might make them $50 on your platform. And you need to provide them hardware right now in order to get them to make that investment of maybe only getting $50. Like, that's horrible. If you invested 6 months of your time and you make $50 in revenue on a specific platform. So like, I just needed to balance out. That's one audience we're speaking to.
Yeah.
There's also another audience of on-the-fence consumer buyers who maybe have $1,000 to $2,500, and they're just waiting for the right headset to buy into spatial computing. And they have to decide, am I buying within my ecosystem or am I buying outside of my ecosystem?
Yeah, absolutely. The decision is very, very different for developers versus consumers. I was speaking to kind of consumer audience, but if you're a developer, with very few exceptions, it would be crazy to target anything other than Quest as your primary market. If this is something that you want to actually make any amount of money back and cover the cost of your project. Of course, there are developers out there for whom, they have a day job, that their interest in development is just purely passion. That's different. I'm speaking to kind of the economic argument here. I'm seeing a lot of questions in the comments asking things like, do we think this is worth the money? A lot of details about hardware. All of this will be in our hardware review. So stay tuned and we'll bring you the answer to a lot of these questions. I'm also seeing some people ask, like, how does Play for Dream compare to Galaxy XR? They use the same chip, very similar displays, if not the same displays. Somewhat similar form factor, but the massive difference is, of course, that Galaxy XR is running Android XR from Google versus, Play for Dream is just another fork. There are a bunch of Android forks out there. Meta's not the only one with Horizon OS. There's Peak OS, there's HTC Vive standalone, there's Play for Dream, and there's a bunch of others in China. But I think you're not going to get the Horizon Store or the Google Play Store on Play for Dream. We had an article from Don Hopper who talked about how he went through all of this effort to make it work as a PC headset. Virtual desktop is there, so that's a different aspect. But based on I've only used both of these headsets for a very short amount of time, maybe half an hour each or less. But based on my experience, I don't see a reason why you would get Play for Dream over Galaxy XR. It seems like Galaxy XR is everything Play for Dream is and more.
So Statler asking, did you run into any lag or chugging on the software side? It's wild to be experiencing 72 hertz in the menu systems and then to click on virtual desktop and get the menu for virtual desktop at 90 frames per second after experiencing the entire operating system at 72 and going, what the hell just happened? Why does this menu feel better than the entire operating system? And all right, so I got to go full circle here to my Agile Lens pickup. I went and picked up the headset, took it off, used it as a personal computer. Then I bring it back to Agile Lens at their holodeck. And I'm like, okay, now it's time for my final test. I hand the headset over to Agile Lens, to Alex over there, brilliant engineer, architect, and theatrical designer over there. They do a Christmas carol each Christmas that's produced in VR with actors. Go look that up this Christmas season when they put that together. I hand the headset back to him, and within he hasn't used an Android in years, but he immediately goes into the menu and unlocks developer mode. He's scrolling through the menu in developer mode and he finds boundary free mode to turn off the boundary. And then he's like, all right, take this in the other room. You're good. And I take the headset back and I walk back into their holodeck room, which is, again, this giant open floor space. I go walk into a corner of the room. It's running at night. He does a fix. He gets a fix over the internet for a hitch in the rendering. It's now at 90 frames per second, running Half-Life Alyx, and I'm in the corner of this holodeck room with the best Wi-Fi imaginable pointed at me for this setup. And I center myself in Half-Life Alyx so that I've got a big, giant walking space in front of me. And I just walk from room to room or from area to area. I lay down on the ground, tried that. And I'm in wireless PCVR from Google, from Steam, and from Geek Odin in our audience. And I'm walking around in Half-Life Alyx in the very same system that I just talked about being like a bare bone, like a spatial computer, but Android based. And I finished it off with, after 4 days of using it completely standalone, I'm like, okay, are you happy? Let's go try the way all of our users dream of it being used. And it worked, right? Like within 20 minutes of handing this over to a developer, he had basically, it was within 30 seconds or a minute or something that I handed the device to him. He had logged onto virtual desktop inside of his own network, right? It was remarkable how quickly he was able to do what developers want to do with this kind of device.
Yeah, I really want to linger again on that 72 hertz versus 90 hertz thing. So Ian's talking about most of the standalone experiences on the headset are running at 72 frames per second, and the display's at 72 hertz, while in virtual desktop was one of the rare times he was able to drive the displays at 90 hertz, because obviously your PC is doing the rendering of Half-Life Alyx. And this 72 hertz problem, I touched on it in my write-up, but this is the answer to how are Samsung and Google trying to deliver a Vision Pro resolution experience at half the price with a much weaker chipset? One of the answers is, I guess, by bringing down the frame rate to 72 hertz. So if you're in Quest 3 in your home environment or Apple Vision Pro in the shared space, you're at 90 hertz. In Quest apps that developers make, it's 72 by default, but most Quest 3 apps, at least most major ones, are gravitating towards 90 hertz these days. But again, Quest 3 is only trying to run at 2K per eye resolution. For the displays, at least, rendering resolution is obviously different. But that is the answer to the question that some people are kind of wondering, how do you square the circle here? How is it that they're trying to do this Vision Pro 4K per eye micro OLED experience at half the price with a mobile chipset? The answer is 72 hertz is one of the answers, at least.
Arlen out there talking about lasers. They're describing Arlen, have you ever seen a cave? A cave only works for one person. Usually you can sort of mess around with it, but I've always loved the design of a cave and the idea of having 3D projectors give you shutter glasses that you can walk around. But P Wizard saying, Ian talking about the dream right there, really was the dream. I do want to briefly mention that I took Vision Pro to the same location to play Pickle Pro with Alex at Agile Lens, and it was really cool to just take a pair of PSVR 2 controllers and we're playing pickleball really quickly with each other in the same space for it, and it worked. We tried to do a recording and send it to you, but there was a security feature there where it turned off the microphone recordings from both of our recordings while we were in our co-located space. That was neat. While I was waiting for him to test, this was the M5 before I handed it off. Before I handed it off to you, I'm looking at all the people in the room, and I'm trying to see how many people it will cut out from my environment. How quickly will it pick them up in all sorts of occasions that maybe the M2 wouldn't pick it up? I also did this test, I think I talked about on last week's podcast, but I need to actually now give this context of Half-Life Alyx. I wonder when we will have a good enough chaperone, guardian, or whatever you want to call the safety systems inside of Apple Vision Pro that can keep you inside of Half-Life Alyx for 90% of the time while you're walking around a physical environment, and only, like, it always knows every single time you're coming up into the physical boundary. How far away are we from that system?
I mean, I find with Vision Pro, it does work like that for me today in ALVR on Vision Pro. It seems to, at least in my experience, it maybe depends, and I've only ever tried it in my own home, obviously, but for me, I walk near a wall or I walk near a couch, and Vision Pro starts to cut it out through pasture. Or if I even get too close to the ground, it'll cut it out through pasture. So I find it's the only headset that can do that dream today.
Well, I think so. What I'm starting to get at here, what I wanted to tug at before we moved on from this section is we have an M5 to analyze over a very large length of time because we've got a good amount of time with it. And that's a lot of overhead that we hope that developers use. And one of the ways I would sort of lose my mind over if developers did this, but you take something like ALVR and you build a Guardian on steroids around the ALVR app that works with that, but also works with multi-room setup and gives me kind of like opacity options so that maybe I could be entirely inside of Half-Life Alyx, but still maybe see ghostly outlines of certain obstacles. Maybe the doorways between rooms are somehow faintly outlined. I'm convinced this is a problem that is potentially solvable with software. And I want to see more explorations to use that system level safety feature Apple has with this specific thing where some of the experiences in one room, some of the experiences in the next room.
Yeah, interestingly, what you're describing is actually possible on both Vision Pro and Quest. I need to try on Galaxy XR. I don't know if it is or not. But if you've set up your room in Quest, it actually will segment out the doors and as well as windows and surfaces and beds and screens as well. Screens being TVs and monitors. So there's nothing theoretically stopping, for example, Valve or Guy Godin from leveraging this scene API on Quest and, for example, cutting out your TV as pass-through so you never punch your TV. It's theoretically right now someone could do that today.
Yes, I mean that's the 100%. I need 7 objects around my house that are like that, right?
Yeah.
And my couch being one of them, and I would like some. And Guy has done some amazing stuff out there with the
Oh,
pass-through
absolutely.
window, right? Already working on this, right?
Yeah, so Guy lets you cut out a pass-through window, but I'm saying you could use these kind of scene view systems. We'll talk about it when we get to V83, but I think I have an image here that very roughly shows what I'm generally talking about.
So
Here we go. So this is the scene API developers get. Again, this is a generic depiction, but there's nothing stopping a developer from having it so that, ironically, this image doesn't show the 2 types I'm talking about, but there are labels for doors and screens. I think this image in particular was made before screens were an option, but if you set up Quest 3 mixed reality, it will have a bounding box to your TV. And developers get access to this, all the position, the bounding box. You could cut out the floor. You can do any of this. It's interesting that they haven't. Obviously, supporting one platform is not ideal. Vision Pro lets you do this too. It gives you these semantic labels. So theoretically, these things are possible.
So like Onakazi saying, it depends how much processing you want to dedicate to active meshing. So the example I was using is it will mesh a room, but it will, at least on Apple Vision Pro, it will intelligently wait until you cross the border of the room before it tries meshing the next room sometimes.
Some of that's down to how it's exposed to the developer. You're not really seeing, the system is always meshing. The thing about Vision Pro, and the same thing with Galaxy XR, and pretty much every headset except for the Quest headsets, is that they have hardware level depth sensing. So they're not actually using much compute at all for their active meshing. In fact, it's always running. On Vision Pro, on Galaxy XR, on Pico 4 Ultra, the headset is always 100% of the time doing an environment mesh, because it's active depth sensing, right? It's LiDAR or DTOF or iTOF. These headsets use slightly different sensors, but fundamentally they're all the same thing. That they send out, light at a certain wavelength and measure the amount of time it takes for the light to return, and fancy stuff like how much the wavelength shifts. For example, it's fundamentally all active depth sensing, and from that you get hardware level information about how far away objects in front of you are, and then you can integrate that into a software model. On Quest headsets, it's all computer vision, so there is an overhead. But as I always say on this show, I'd be shocked if Quest 4 didn't have a lot of this, or whatever they call their next headset.
I don't know if we have any Android or Google people watching us, but I've got to talk about Bringhurst's comment. If the boundary understood where you were physically compared to the game, it could be possible to reorient you inside the game so you were compelled to walk in a direction that conformed to your boundary. You're talking about redirected walking. It is the dream of VR. You're talking about the holodeck, fundamentally, the core feature of the holodeck. And there's all sorts of tricks that developers can use to trick your brain. Imagine a door changing from one wall to the adjoining wall when you're facing away from it. So when you turn around, the room has reoriented itself to put a door where it wasn't before. You don't notice it, but now it's oriented to keep you away from the boundaries, right? You go through that door, you're never going to hit a boundary because of the way they reoriented. You could have the saccades of your eyes potentially be used as space to reorient it, some of the elements around you. During the time when your eye moves from one spot to another, you are blind. And so there's potential during that time to reorient certain elements in the same way that have been explored. I haven't seen any really good examples of what I just described. T for God?
Yeah, I was just about to say, you don't have to imagine any of this. You can go play it right now on your Quest headset. Go and get the game T for God. It does exactly this. It uses very clever game design to keep you inside your room while you feel like you're exploring a huge environment. And yes, if you have an even bigger environment, there are these exotic research ideas that have been tried for over a decade now that Ian's talking about. But T for God, as in TEAFORGOD. Go play that game on your Quest headset right now, and you can experience this in your own home.
Yep. And so there's a I love our commenters here. We think many steps ahead on where this is all going, what needs to happen. We work our way back to it. We work our way forward to it sometimes, trying to figure out which way we go. but we need more environmental understanding. We need lots of developers to use that understanding in lots of clever ways. And goodness, you will find it on uploadvr.com as soon as these ideas hit the internet. One of the ideas, I was starting to laugh here on the Google person. All right, go back to our research and find Google robot. I can't remember what the other key terms was. Google robot, uploadvr.com, and my name, right? They showed research where a robot could you could look at a UI floating in front of you and select an object that you want delivered to you in virtual reality. So imagine you're looking at a UI floating up right in front of you, and you want a can of Coke. So you look at the can of Coke, you pinch on it, and you say, "Okay, can of Coke, I want you to go over onto this table inside of Half-Life Alyx," right? So you release your pinch on the can of Coke, and it shows a materializing can of Coke over on the entry level of Half-Life Alyx, the entry room, the first level. And on a table there, you see a little can of Coke that's slowly filling in from the bottom up, like it's a UI of it, right? 1%, 2%, 3%, all the way up to 98%. When it gets to 100%, that can of Coke is fully materialized right there on that table inside Half-Life Alyx. It glows a little bit to indicate it's a different item from everything else in Half-Life Alyx. And then you reach with your open hand tracking, that's the only way this works, to the can of Coke, and you pick it up. It's a physical object. You drink from it. What happened was a robot delivered the can of Coke over the 100% fill-in line to the spot that you selected inside of virtual reality. One of the most remarkable ideas I've ever seen shared. It's if Google can turn that into software that actually happens inside of Android XR, we're going to lose some brains to how amazing VR is going to be. Like, you're going to spend a lot of your hours in VR if robots can deliver packages to you that feel as if like they materialized as a transporter.
Yeah, I'm seeing a lot of our commenters, as well as T for God being a great example of that redirection example that we were talking about earlier, bringing up Eye of the Temple, which is another fantastic game that really takes this idea of making your physical space feel like it's significantly larger than it is for very clever game design reasons. So yes, Eye of the Temple. I think about a year ago, maybe 6 months ago, it got a Quest 3 graphics update as well. The developer talked as well on UploadVR at one point about how the Quest release is what was able to make this profitable. It started on Steam VR. Eye of the Temple, fantastic game. We really need to move on now. A lot of topics.
I wanted to answer what a saccade is. Do you want to explain what a saccade is? So we can, yeah.
You can go for it, but I think if we keep it brief, we do need to move on for time here.
Yeah, I wanted to answer Sampler's question. So a saccade is when your eye is twitching, basically, from point to point. It goes in really direct movements. During the time that your eye is moving from one point to another, the retina doesn't receive light, as I understand it. I could be misconstruing this, but while that's called a saccade, when the eye is actually moving into different locations, and it's a trick that can be used but for very far advanced systems. All right, let's talk about Vimeo.
Yeah, just to expand on that for the saccade, it is, as Ian's saying, when your eyes very quickly, like twitch moving, really quickly moving, both eyes to be clear, from one gaze position to another, and your perceptual system kind of fills in the gaps between there. And it's almost like when you're blinking, because you don't actually sort of see in that moment. Your brain is almost using software rather than the hardware that it's getting in, to use a computer analogy, to kind of fill in that. And as Ian pointing out, during that saccade, because your brain is filling in the gaps in the background, you can change the environment. And so, yes, when you have very, very accurate eye tracking, you can mess with people in a way that can be advantageous or disadvantageous. If you're making something like a horror game, for example, there's all kinds of crazy things you can do with eye tracking in a horror game. One of the examples being, of course, if you are literally blinking, you can insert a monster nearby. You can do similar things with saccades. Let's move on to talk about our next topic then. We've talked so much about Galaxy XR and Android XR, and it's been an amazing conversation. We will bring you more coverage once we have the unit that we have for review, and we'll be bringing you all the details that you want. Again, if you have an important question about it, put it underneath our comments, and we'll try to incorporate that in the review. So our next topic for today is about Vimeo. And that is that Vimeo has announced that by the end of this year, they will support Apple Immersive Video. You'll be able to just upload it directly to Vimeo, and then the Vimeo Vision OS app will play it natively on Vision Pro. So this is another story, another part of the kind of saga of Apple Immersive Video, going from something that required a custom Apple camera that you would have to be very, very close with Apple to get, and kind of be, lent out this camera that Apple has literally just put together in-house based on their next VR acquisition, to the situation we're in today, where there are these Blackmagic cameras that any creator in theory can buy for $30,000, and they can use DaVinci Resolve software made by Blackmagic for video editing to create Apple Immersive Video, and they can distribute it through their own Vision OS app, or if they have a contract with Apple, they can put it on Apple TV. But this Vimeo announcement means that there will be now kind of a essentially semi-open platform which you'll be able to upload their content onto. So yeah, I think this is interesting, because as we keep pointing out, one of the major selling points for Apple Vision Pro is that Apple Immersive Video is just 180-degree 3D video done well. It's 4K per eye, 90 frames per second, high dynamic range, great spatial audio. It's one of those features that unfortunately we can't show you, because DRM means you can't record it in the Apple TV app, you can't cast it, you can't do anything like that. But if you do have an Apple Store near you, I'm going to say this almost every show that we talk about this, go to the Apple Store, get a demo, book a demo. They will let you try Apple Immersive Video, and you can see for yourself. And as we talked about, next year, there's going to be this live Apple Immersive Video coming out. But yeah, Vimeo is going to be the platform that means that rather than having to wait for drip feeds of content on Apple TV, there now should be a lot more. And Vimeo, to be clear, context-wise, was also the first major platform to add support for Apple spatial video that you can upload from your iPhone.
Yeah, we should move on, but I'm just going to make a random comment on calling this virtual reality, of calling what you see captured by these cameras virtual reality. CNET did the world a good service this week by calling the persona avatars that Apple puts out, they call them VR avatars in their headline, which, I mean, Apple has its own terminology for these things, and we use those terms, but those are the most advanced VR avatars in the world right now, and this is the most advanced VR camera that's available for, I don't know, for people to use to capture really incredibly highly immersive content, and it's all virtual reality. This is in some cases it's non-interactive, but it is the most photorealistic to your eyes virtual reality that you can have. And I just wanted to make that comment that that's what it is.
Yeah, look, the terminology you can have debates on. It's not incredibly important what you call it. I would just call it immersive video, and it keeps it simple. But I want to build on what you're saying. But not only is this, the most advanced immersive camera or VR camera or whatever you want to call it, this is one of the most advanced cameras, full stop, in the world. This is, when you look at the specs of this thing, the bit rate it records at, the dynamic range it has in terms of actually being able to capture in low light, this is among the most advanced cameras in the world. I think it has like the second highest dynamic range of any camera. And I'm including, Hollywood movie cameras here. So $30,000 is a lot of money. As a consumer, obviously, if the idea of buying a camera like this is absurd. But for creators, the capability they get from this is recording 8K per eye at 90 frames per second, high dynamic range at extremely high bit rate. There's nothing else in the world like this. And yeah, this is the setup that's going to be used for all this content. We talk about it often. One of the things that I've seen some of the mainstream tech outlets talk about Vision Pro is saying, this immersive content is great, but we're not getting enough of it. You finish this 5-minute experience you get, or, the 30-minute MotoGP experience, then you're like, what's next? What do I watch tonight? Well, this is how you make this happen. Apple, the story here that we've been following, and I think uniquely sort of detailed along the way, following and laying out, is that Apple has been investing in how to make Apple Immersive Video something that is a widespread platform rather than just a drip feed content from custom cameras. And all this is the culmination of years. We talked about this camera at WWDC 24 when it was first announced, and all of this DaVinci partnership. And this was something that, you could see coming a mile away, but now it's all coming together. And yeah, I can't wait to see what content's on Vimeo next year.
So going back to our original, or going back to the comment I was making about that briefing in VR with Apple, Apple has everything they need to premiere a movie like F1, which hasn't yet hit the Apple platform yet. I think it's coming very soon. But to do briefings with Brad Pitt going and putting on a Vision Pro, and then 2 or 3 or 4 journalists being brought in at a time to do roundtable interviews with Brad Pitt virtually, as him appearing as his persona avatar, and these journalists asking him about his commitment to the art form of acting for the F1 movie. They could do a whole the way there's very specialized reporters who have to live in Hollywood in order to go to these premiere events or go to these press junkets and interview these sources. And it's a whole to-do. It's a whole massive production of just getting the next crew ready with their cameras to interview the next reporter. You could have 5 or 6 teams of reporters lined up to talk to Brad Pitt one after another. And then after they all interview Brad Pitt, you sit down for the IMAX edition of F1 the movie with aspect ratios that you could never see on your flat screen television at home. And that's just the beginning, right? Like that's something they can do next month with everything that they've built here. And we're still years away from that sort of thing being done on competing platforms.
Yeah, the Bono experience is kind of like that. It's the longest Apple Immersive Video technically, but it's actually a lot of flat screen stuff at, as you say, different aspect ratios, adding stuff outside the frame, combined with specially filmed Apple Immersive Video. And I see some people here. Well, one comment I want to point out first is from Onakazi, pointing out that if you are a smaller studio, you will rent this, not buy it. So you can. Onakazi is suggesting $3,000 for a short-term rental. That's an example of what creators might be able to pay. I see other people asking, what about the Quest equivalent here? We don't know yet what the hardware that is going to be used by the James Cameron partnership will be to make content for the Quest. We will, when Meta and James Cameron formally announce it, we will obviously bring you the details here. Meta is going to want an equivalent. It is reportedly, according to the Wall Street Journal, a huge focus for Meta's next year headset, that ultra lightweight headset that is expected to be around $1,000 and really be focused on this media watching and virtual screens experience. They're going to want an equivalent. We just haven't heard that story yet because Meta hasn't even shipped the headset or kind of really brought anything out from that partnership other than the Avatar 3 trailer on Quest. It's still early days. I think like the one thing I want to point out about the James Cameron partnership is it's very clearly a response to Apple Immersive Video, right? Like Meta, immersive video was a huge focus for Meta in the original days. In fact, it was the primary selling point for Samsung Gear VR powered by Oculus. And it was a massive use case for Oculus Go. And I think in typical Meta fashion, they learned all the wrong lessons because it sucked back then. The resolution wasn't good enough. The bitrate wasn't good enough. The frame rate wasn't good enough. So you saw a low resolution, blocky image, and worse, but you only had so many pixels and too many creators decided to go for 360. And so that would, half your angular resolution. And so I think you saw in Quest, like this big pullback from immersive video as a focus for Meta for a while. And it was all about gaming and room scale. And then Apple came along and said, actually, it wasn't a bad idea. You just did the implementation wrong. And I think there are a lot of parallels here with, for example, Quest Pro. Quest Pro was not a bad idea, as Galaxy XR is proving. The implementation just wasn't good enough. And so I think Meta learned the lesson of, oh, nobody wants a Quest Pro form factor headset over $1,000. That's obviously. Whereas no, in the same way, no, oh no, people don't want immersive video. No, they just want it good enough. It just has to be good enough. People don't want a product that isn't good enough. And that's why we keep harping on about Apple immersive video because, and I'll admit this myself, I thought the same thing because I'd spent so much time watching crappy immersive video that I just kind of, my body almost had a repulsion to it of just, I don't want to watch another blocky compression stream, with bad scale. And
that was my reaction looking at 180-degree video in Galaxy XR. I noped out of it really fast. I had that. Yeah.
Interesting. So tell us about the 180 experience, video experience on Galaxy XR.
I can't remember. I think it was on YouTube. I went really quickly into it, and it just was not the resolution that I needed. It wasn't anything. It was that exactly what you described. I had that experience in Galaxy XR, and it needs a level of polish and a level of quality that is just not non-existent elsewhere. I was going to throw up another idea here.
Just to build on, just before you say that, I just want to completely agree with you and say that YouTube on Quest has got immersive video, and it's the same issue. There needs to be a minimal quality bar. Apple is saying with Apple immersive video as a format, there's nothing fundamentally technologically different about Apple immersive video, right? There are tweaks underlying, right? James O'Loughlin in our comments is pointing out some of these tweaks. It's a fancy format for 180-degree 3D video, but it's got a quality bar and it's a level of polish and execution that puts it far beyond the VR 180. So
the idea I want to throw out here is, what if OLED is considered by Apple as necessary for the mastering of the platform, that they don't want to see Apple immersive on headsets without OLED. So consider that idea. Maybe they back off that. Maybe they allow Apple immersive on non-OLED displays. But imagine that is one of their minimum bars. You've got this Samsung headset, right, that has OLED in it. What would it take for Apple TV to be inside of the Samsung Galaxy XR experience? What if they had a partnership? What if Apple had a partnership with NBC, and you go and get the NBC app from the Google Play Store, you download it, and if you have a broadcast subscription for NBC you've got a cable subscription for NBC or whatever it is. Maybe I don't know how they do this, right? I don't know how they there's so many partners they could pick for this. But as long as you log in on that subscription, then you get all of the Apple immersive content inside of Galaxy XR.
Why wouldn't they just use Apple TV? You can install the flat screen Apple TV in Galaxy XR today.
They absolutely could. What I'm wondering is about the broadcast rights being bundled in such a way that if you want to access every Lakers game,
it's going to be through the NBA app. Yeah,
both, right? You want every flat game, plus a bunch of the immersive games, and you don't really care. There's a route right there where Apple could go and get Apple TV on the Samsung Galaxy XR and on the Apple Vision Pro, and you can get Apple's best content that they're making for virtual reality right now on a $3,500 device or a $2,000 device. Both have OLED, both have the minimum viable quality that they consider. Yeah.
I don't think that's the reason they don't do it. OLED, I agree that for their own products, you're absolutely right to say Apple clearly does have OLED as a minimum. But I think right now, Apple Immersive Video is a seller for Vision Pro. It's a reason to buy a Vision Pro. That's the reason it exists.
You're right. But here's what I wanted to push back on that is Google Maps. I just made the argument that Google Maps belongs on every headset. You're making an argument that Apple TV belongs on every headset.
I'm saying I would love to have it, but from Apple's perspective, I understand why they don't. It's a reason to buy an Apple Vision Pro, right? In the same way that Google Maps is a reason to buy an Android XR headset. Until they're the only thing that makes these companies change their mind about that is when something gets dramatic market share, right? When it becomes so big that you can't avoid it. Same, the reason why Google services are on Android phones and the reason, are on iPhones, and the reason why Apple TV and Apple Music are on Android phones, because the market share is unignorable. None of these headsets are anywhere near that. They would need to be orders of magnitude bigger for the company to say, you know what, there's so many customers here, we'd be crazy to ignore them. Right now, all these companies are just starting. They're seeding a platform. They're trying to grow from nothing. They want to throw all their own advantages into their own products.
Fascinating breakdown. I think you're mostly right. What I would push back on is that they're seeding creators, not consumers, with content making devices for content that will last the test of time. Like in theory, you capture something with one of these cameras, you can sell it for 30 years, just like a movie. Just like you get that long tail of profit from the content you make by presenting it in different formats. It's a different model than we're used to with Apple. You're right about it selling Apple Vision Pros, but if they have a lead over the competition of multiple years over installing these cameras in every place imaginable, it's actually kind of like it's almost like Facebook trying to corner all the exclusive colleges, right? Like it actually makes sense for them to put cameras in as many places as humanly possible, and to maybe take investment from friends or partners to build out those cameras as many. Like there's so many ways to get other companies in this partnership. And one of the ways is to put the Apple TV app on other devices, which to your point is, yeah, it's very un-Apple like, but I'm thinking it's a great way to get an entire industry building in your format, not just Apple centric stuff.
No, you're right that if their goal was, at some point, look, for each of these three giant platforms, there are far more people who haven't bought into any of them than are on the other competition. So a lot of this is rising tide. I just think it's far too early for Apple to do that. We'll see. We'll have to see. I would strongly bet that it's going to be very many years before we see Apple immersive video from Apple on Galaxy XR, and I would say never for Quest. Apple detests Meta. I've read the leaked emails. Apple executives detest Meta.
It's almost. Do you remember there was some headline we had a long time ago about like, could we see exclusives traded between Sony and Meta? Could we see like two of the games that only appeared on PlayStation headsets suddenly on Quest headsets, and then two games that were only on Quest headsets appear on Sony headsets? Ultimately, I want Google Earth, that entire Google Earth experience on my Vision Pro, and I want my entire Apple TV experience on my Galaxy XR. And like it's almost trade worthy, right? Like each of them could pay billions of dollars to the other one to make it one of the experiences they have on the experience, or they could just trade.
Look, what I agree with you on is that I want them to. I want that too, but I think, right now that's not what these companies want. They want to build out their platform and throw every advantage they have in, right? This is going to be fierce competition between Meta Horizon OS, Google Android XR, and Apple Vision OS over the next decade, and decades, plural. They are going to want to put every card they have into their own system at this point, and that's what we're seeing so far. Do we want to move on to talk about VRChat on mobile?
Yep, just looking at our comments, Sal mentioning Warner Brothers up for sale and Meta could buy that, and James mentioning them being in a war and Not Suspicious saying Apple is not messing around. I'm happy to see the competition really heat up in this industry. Yeah, let's be clear here. There was a good half decade there where the only player was Meta, followed by Sony trying to do the PSVR 2 on a very weird timescale that didn't work for it.
Yeah, there was a year where everything was Quest 2, right? Before PlayStation VR 2 was out, when PlayStation VR was basically right.
Half-Life Alyx had already hit the market, and
everything, like all we were seeing, Quest 2 was skyrocketing on Steam VR. There was no, Pico 4 yet. There was no PlayStation VR 2. Apple was just a rumor. Google had left the market years ago. And there were times where we were like, every piece of news we've written this week is about Quest, because Meta was firing out, so many games and updates and partnerships. And we were literally scouring the internet. Like we were trying to find other news that doesn't relate to Quest 2. There were days where we genuinely were trying, but we just couldn't, because there weren't any other companies doing anything newsworthy on that week. And
Yep.
goodness, we're not in that era. It's a much more dynamic and vibrant market today. In some ways, it's bad, because obviously it means our workload is obviously a lot. We're happy to see it. We're happy to see a dynamic market full of competition. And yeah, thank goodness we're in that era of everything being Quest 2.
Let's move on to VRChat, but let me make that pitch to become a member or a patron at UploadVR.com. I'm seeing everyone refer to the words XR in our comments, and I'm not going to launch into the terminology debate here right now, but I am in virtual reality. This is a place I am located in, and it's a phenomenal, like, what's frustrating is to see Galaxy XR try to rebrand what we were already doing. Right now, it's this bigger thing. It's VR plus something else, extended reality, AR, and I just what kills me is when we have the reason I need to make the pitch to become a member is when the news gets overwhelming, when everyone is pushing out what they're doing. We have to remove the fluff from what they're saying. We have to remove the claims. We have to point. That's a claim. That's not a fact. They didn't actually ship that and put that on somebody's head. And they use all of their own technology, right? They like their own terminology. It's so confusing for you, our audience that understands that we're wearing VR headsets when we're wearing Quests and Vision Pro, to like explain to someone else what is the value of this headset when every company calls it a different thing. It's madness. And we as reporters are trying to like help not just ourselves, but help you explain to everyone else out there that this is all part of the same darn trend. These companies, the biggest technology companies in the world, are all shipping the same darn thing. And it's the same as the DK1 in 2012, right? Like, it's the same fundamental architecture. All right, let's move on to VRChat.
Yeah, lenses and displays. Lenses magnifying displays, same architecture. Yeah, let's talk about VRChat arriving on mobile. Arriving is perhaps not the most accurate terminology, because they have been beta testing this for years now, but it is now available publicly on the Google Play Store and on the Apple App Store for Android phones, Android tablets, iPhones, and iPads. Sorry, I'm just trying to bring up the image here. Yep, here we go. So again, this has been alpha and beta tested for years, but now you can just go on to the App Store on your iPhone, or the Google Play Store on your Android device, or App Store on your iPad, and download VRChat and play it flat screen. This is obviously a trend that all of these platforms have been moving to bring in as many users as possible, right? Rec Room did it first in terms of being available on mobile. VRChat is here now. Horizon Worlds is available on mobile. Horizon Worlds, however, is cloud streamed to your phone, which can be janky at times, especially for me. I've never found Horizon Worlds streaming to work well on mobile. Horizon Hyperscape streaming works great on my headset, so that's a really weird thing to encounter, that it works so badly on my phone and my laptop and any other device I've tried it on. But this VRChat integration is not cloud streamed, it is native. So with that comes a requirement, and that requirement is 6 gigabytes of RAM. So you need a device with 6 gigabytes of RAM to run VRChat on your phone. For iOS, that means iPhone 12 Pro or 12 Pro Max, or 13 Pro or 13 Pro Max, or any 14 or above model. For iPad, that means the 4th gen iPad Pro, the 5th gen iPad Air, or the 7th gen iPad Mini or above. For Android, it's just, do you have 6 gigabytes of RAM? So just like on standalone headsets, the thing that's important to understand about VRChat is that there kind of are two kinds of VRChat worlds. There are PC only worlds, which you cannot access on a phone or a Quest headset or a Pico headset or a Vive standalone, which all run VRChat. You can only access the worlds that are mobile ready, right? So VRChat worlds. So some of the most impressive VRChat worlds you see when people are showing off, on social media, here's my super cool VRChat world, or look at the crazy graphics of VRChat, are actually PC only. You can't access those on mobile. And so that's the one problem I have sometimes when people are comparing VRChat and competitors like Rec Room and Horizon Worlds and Blocks and things like that, that make clear when you're talking about these worlds, because that's not a valid comparison to what runs on mobile. That said, one of the things that VRChat has been done amazingly over the past few years is this used to also be the case for avatars. It used to be that if you had a PC quality avatar, you would literally see a floating placeholder on mobile. Terrible UX, but VRChat, this is years ago now, introduced this imposter system where they automatically generate a lower quality version of your avatar so that mobile users can see what you look like, not the perfect full quality one. They've gotten better since this image, by the way. This is just a general depiction of what I'm talking about. They've improved this quality. So, they're still in this world where there are PC only worlds, but at least you see everyone's avatar now.
I see a comment out there from someone thanking us for not having Discus for comments on our website, and I want to say thank you for David getting us off of WordPress. I don't miss it. So he got us a new publishing platform and a new commenting platform. So if you have him to thank for that on our website, yeah, please become a member. Get rid of those ads.
It was not fun to deal with all the work. So much of our time when we use WordPress was just dealing with WordPress is shit and the website going down all the time and just the complexity of WordPress and its plugin architecture. And don't use WordPress. That's one piece of recommendation I have. I'm going to get in trouble from some WordPress fanboy or person there. There are obviously legitimate reasons to use it. I'm just saying in our experience.
Yeah, there was the one WordPress fan that got inside of our WordPress installation and left notes for all of our readers. I don't know if any of our commenters remember that bit of history, but that was a heck of a thing to realize we needed to be off of WordPress because of. We ready to talk about Magic Leap and Google? I'm ready to skip past that one as quickly as we can.
Yeah, the one thing I want to say about VRChat now is I don't know if the name still sticks. My understanding is that now the majority of people using VRChat are on a flat screen, be it a PC flat screen or a mobile flat screen. I get that it's just a name. There's nothing wrong with it. I just think it is kind of interesting how, we talk about VRChat, and whenever you say like, oh, this many hundreds of thousands of users, like how many were actually in a headset and how many were on a flat screen? And I want to say what I always say about all these platforms, and this applies to Rec Room and Horizon Worlds and Roblox and everything. I think that there is something lost when you add flat screen support. I understand the advantage, especially from an investor's perspective. Oh, bro, you can bring in people that don't have a headset. It's the first thing people talk about when you talk about a VR platform that's social. I just think there's something lost, and I'm going to repeat my most controversial, I think, long-term prediction is that I think the winning VR social platform on the scale of decades will be one that not only doesn't run on mobile, but that you couldn't conceive of running on mobile because the interaction is so reliant on having a physical, dexterous interactions in the near field with avatars that are close by you, that are represented at true scale, that it won't work. My most controversial opinion, I am aware that many people hate it and disagree. You are very, very welcome to disagree. I'm just giving my craziest prediction. We'll see.
I agree with it in concept, but I would love to have like VRChat represent phones as something, not as an avatar, right? If you log in on a phone, you're a floating sprite or something. It's a completely different interaction paradigm. I want systems that do that, where you can see all the phone users all around you and the avatar users as a way of separating those things out. But
maybe do like a spectator mode or something, yeah, I guess. But we'll see. I see a few people agreeing here. Jorg saying adding flat screen ruined Rec Room for Jorg. I agree, to be honest. I really much prefer the Rec Room before it. Fundamentally, if you have to design your interactions to work on both sixed off dexterous hand input and a touch screen and a keyboard and mouse and a gamepad, you're going to lose degrees of freedom, right? It's in the word, the sixed off positional tracking. You're losing degrees of freedom. So you have to build an interaction system, a UI system. Everything has to be built around the least degrees of freedom that people have. And you're trying to map a much lower bandwidth input to the same experience, and then you don't build something that fundamentally takes advantage of high bandwidth input. So I see a few people agreeing here. I see DCM saying, I tried VRChat on Android mobile, not a fan, just didn't have my Quest with me at the time. Arlen is saying VRChat and flat screen misses the point. I agree.
Yeah, I'm still waiting to have my phone in VR, right? Like, just have everything on my phone. Just I can look down, I'm holding it, and the screen is there, and I can pull up my apps on it, and some of this goes away because I'm in the place, and I'm also just messing around on my phone completely separate to this. I'm seeing people mention Resonite and how amazing it is, and how hard it is on their PCs. A lot of optimization work still to be done there. I think they had a big optimization update recently, though.
Platform, yeah. I think, yeah, we did see, I think Kelly reported on it. Yeah. So.
I think we gotta fill in your bingo card for the mention of Walkabout, though. Walkabout did the flat screen version, but I've noticed they haven't really added Android, right? It felt like maybe they came up against the realization that you are pointing out here, that it is such a different mode of input. Maybe we shouldn't like pull this thread anymore of going into flat, because yes, it's a big, giant, great surface to get a few people in, but you lose that magic wandering experience that you get in VR. And I don't know, it's we kind of want both, and you kind of don't want both at the same time. I can totally understand why so many people fail at this.
Jorg is clarifying their opinion and saying that for them, it was about the culture, the average age, and how people interacted. I think the age thing is very interesting to point out, but simultaneously, it also comes down to, I think you're a bit, there's more, how do I put this? Pressure almost is not the right word. People seem to be kinder in VR on average than if they're just on a flat screen. Being disembodied voice compared to having a person there with a body and gait, on average, now there are people who are still dicks in VR, but on average, in my experience of playing multiplayer flat screen video games and playing multiplayer VR video games, people consider you more of a human being when they're talking to you than they do. And there is closer to real life social pressures. Now, they're not there entirely. People, again, especially when you have children. But if you rule out children for a second, just talking about adults, I think I have a more civil experience. I don't think I know. I personally have a much more civil experience in multiplayer VR games than I ever have in flat screen games. The one flat screen game that was an exception was EVE Online, and that's the only time I've ever had. Everyone was very pleasant, even if they were, in the game rules, mean to you, as in, they used the game, they would still be nice about it.
I love what I've wanted in an MMO is some kind of mechanic where you start as a spirit that can't actually interact with the world, and you have to team up with other spirits to like accomplish a task and prove your worth for being birthed into the MMO world with everyone else. Like, why should you be able to break everyone else's farms just because right when you join the game and can run over their farm and destroy a plot of land? There should be a whole like building up system of being able to interact with the world, and I don't know, interact with other players in a really positive way. And right now, none of the flow systems for joining any of these worlds are built for that kind of camaraderie of finding another random person and accomplishing a task and being, oh, hey, you want to go do this together? Do you want to go beat up this monster? I would love to see games nail that. Like, it feels like there's neat things to do there.
There's a lot of unexplored design space here. Should we move on to talk about Magic Leap?
Yeah, let's move through that as quickly as possible because I am not interested in hearing about this.
Okay. Well, we'll still bring it up to you as news. So that
Sorry, I'm teasing. Yeah.
I know, I know. Trust me, I share a lot of your skepticism on Magic Leap. So the news here is that Magic Leap has extended its partnership with Google by 3 years. The partnership was announced last year as Google was starting to put together its Android XR strategy. And the idea here, just to make this really simple, is that Magic Leap is providing the optics, so the waveguides, for a reference design for Android smart glasses with a HUD and potentially full true AR in the future, but they're kind of cagey on that. What they showed off at this Saudi Arabia conference was HUD glasses. So glasses that are very similar to the Meta Ray-Ban display, except instead of having Meta services, they would have Google services. But again, this isn't Magic Leap 3. Our understanding is that Magic Leap is not making headsets anymore. They are a technology provider. So if you're a company, I'm just going to throw out random companies. These are not related to any real thing. I'm just giving examples, Sony, Sharp, TCL, whatever. And you want to make HUD glasses on the market. You can get Google software. So you get Google Maps and Gemini and all of that. And then Magic Leap's waveguides. And so you get the hard tech on the software and hardware side done for you, and you can focus on like, what do you want to make different? How do you want to integrate this? That's the pitch here from Google and Magic Leap. And so you may kind of notice here, wait a minute, last year Google showed off Android XR, or let's not say Android XR because it's not the same Android XR as headsets. They showed off Gemini smart glasses with a heads-up display at TED and at Google I/O. Those used waveguides from a different supplier, though. And you can actually see one of the big issues with the waveguide that was shown off at I/O and TED in that the display was very visible. And let me see if I can bring this up here. The image from TED made this really, really clear. Yep, here it is right here. At certain angles, you could very, very clearly see the display. So this is not the Magic Leap waveguide as far as we are understanding it. This is from last year, this is from very, very early this year. And the Magic Leap design that is being shown here, we don't know exactly what's different, but Google said this in the press release. They said, what makes this prototype stand out is how natural it feels to look through. Magic Leap's precision in optics and waveguide design gives the display a level of clarity and stability that's rare today. So one of the things about the Meta Ray-Ban display is that it doesn't have this kind of light leakage, right? You don't see even whether someone has the display on or not. And you'll read about this in my review that I'm working on finalizing this weekend. But like, this is very, very essential, I think, and maybe something that Google realized that this optical architecture that they were demoing during I/O and at TED wasn't going to be up to scratch for a consumer product. And they've looked back at their Magic Leap partnership here that they have and said, why don't we kind of leverage maybe these instead? But again, this is not for a first-party Google product. They specifically called this a reference design. This one here is a new one. It's subtly different in appearance. They showed it off. You can see in our article there, they kind of talked about it during this demo in Saudi Arabia. It's a reference design. And we've heard that phrase so many times over the past 10 years in VR and AR. These companies do not want to do it themselves. When might we see this is the question. Let's just get straight to the real question here. The answer is, according to some South Korean reports, Samsung may launch HUD glasses next year. And so it's the same story again as it is with the Galaxy XR headset. Well, we could see Galaxy glasses or whatever the heck Samsung decides to call them. Samsung's the hardware partner, Google's the software partner, and in this case for the glasses, Magic Leap is potentially the waveguide provider.
I have a hard time being excited about this for multiple reasons. One of them being that Google, fundamentally, Magic Leap is a shell of what it was. It is, David pointed it out hardware-wise, that it's not making its own headsets anymore. But personnel-wise, they are absent most of the people they had when they had billions of dollars to spend. So those people are at Apple, at Meta, at Google building some of these technologies after they got laid off at Magic Leap. And then Google was one of the funders of those multi-billion-dollar investments into Magic Leap. So what you have here is a dramatically reduced vision of what Magic Leap intended to produce using the bones of what Google invested in a completely different way. Like they invested in a completely different idea, and now they're resorting to using this piece of that overall idea for a completely different purpose. It doesn't make me super confident that Google has a cohesive plan for this.
So I think that's somewhat fair. There's a little bit I push back on. I think generally you're right in saying that, look, Magic Leap was one of the most hyped startups of the 2010s. It was supposed to bring consumer AR to the wide world, right? And today, 25, not only are they making the glasses, they're not making the headset, they're just making the waveguide in it. But look, I think there's kind of an upside in that, in saying that in all this R&D that Magic Leap put in all this time, they were not able to come up with a product that people want at mass scale. Some businesses do. It's not exactly a massive hit. What they were able to do is build up massive expertise in waveguides. And Magic Leap 2 today is still the best in class glass waveguide that anyone has ever shipped. Like it's got nearly Orion level field of view. That said, not in a glasses form factor, right? Magic Leap is, a headset. It's a lot heavier. It's like 200 and something grams, and the compute isn't even there. So that's just pretty much the display and optics. But that expertise is useful and it's valuable. And I don't think you would see Google making this partnership and this investment if it wasn't necessary. And I should point out there were rumors a while ago that Meta was looking to license Magic Leap's technology as well. I don't want us to underplay just how much experience they've built up in being one of the first companies to pour billions of dollars into trying advancing optical waveguides.
Arlen, talking about AR smart glasses, need a real good AI cook app that works like the XR version of Blue Apron, and it can see what's in your fridge and your cabinets and your appliances and help make a meal in real time. I'm there with you, and I don't know why we don't have a Birdbath Optics AR headset that you just hang in your kitchen for that purpose, right? You go into your kitchen, you pull it off, you can put it on, and it's like, make me my meal, right? And you go around everywhere and do it.
I'll tell you why Birdbath is not the answer. The fundamental problem with Birdbath optics when you try to use them for AR rather than just for a virtual screen in front of you is that how opaque the virtual imagery in Birdbath is like inversely related to how transparent the display is. So on most of these Birdbath glasses, like X-Real 1, for example, you adjust the dimming, but the darker you make the lens, right, the overall lens, the more opaque the virtual object. So you have to choose between, do you want to actually see your cooking or do you want to see the virtual content on top of it, which is what that's the issue with Birdbath. But this is why waveguides are the natural solution. The app you talked about, someone has made it for spectacles. There is a app for spectacles that is exactly what was just described by the commenter. The problem is, again, cost, field of view, all of these things kind of come in, and we'll see it, right? We will see true AR glasses emerge in the next few years, but they're going to be limited and expensive when they first emerge.
I'm going to throw out a random thought I had, and we'll see how out of left field it is here. Do you remember the whale? You remember the whale in the gymnasium?
The Magic Leap whale?
The Magic Leap whale in the gymnasium. Yes, that was a...
Yes.
Okay. Here's my weird comment. Would Magic Leap still be raising money today if they had just become an AI generation startup and then just let you generate whale videos like that? Wouldn't that have been a wonderful route to keep raising billions? And now you can just type in whale jumping out of a gymnasium into a browser and you get a video that shows you exactly what you want.
I mean, I think that's very, very tangential. For our audience who maybe, for people who aren't aware of what we're referring to, I mentioned earlier, Magic Leap was one of the most hyped startups of the 2010s. And one of the videos they had to tease their technology, they had a bunch of these videos teasing that they were going to bring consumer AR. One of them was in a gymnasium where this wheel would emerge out of the water, and it was this enormous thing. Now, in practice, if you tried to do that on Magic Leap 1, you would only see, as we always point out in this podcast, a little subsection slice of the wheel because the field of view was so limited. And it's not just Magic Leap, as we always say. Fundamentally, the field of view is the Achilles heel of trying to use waveguides for immersive AR rather than just kind of a HUD or something like that. So they promised a lot. They were not able to deliver, but now we're seeing a real market emerge with waveguides, which is these HUD glasses. And Magic Leap is saying, hey, we've spent billions of dollars researching waveguides. We make some of the best waveguides in the world. And Google is saying, okay, why don't you let interested Gemini glasses partners use those waveguides as part of our kind of partnership? So for at least 3 years, Magic Leap has a life.
But David, I'm still broken here. I'm still broken. My idea is it is off in right field. But look, on the Meta glasses today, you take a video of an empty gymnasium, and then you say to the Meta AI, "Hey Meta, insert a whale in here," and you're going to end up with footage that looks almost identical to the CGI footage from Magic Leap a decade ago, and it's just as stupid as it was a decade ago, is my point.
Yes, but of course the tease there was that you would really be able to see through a head-mounted device this wheel, and the only thing that can do that is
I still can't see the whale in my glasses, though, David, is my point.
You can in your glasses, but you can in your Vision Pro or your Quest 3 or your Galaxy XR, right? If you use specifically, I think only Quest 3, because you can use the Niantic SDK. The only way you need to do long distance meshing. And as we reported on a few months ago, Niantic has that long distance meshing. So you can do the wheel demo today in a Quest 3 if you wanted. Someone should build it, actually. If you're a developer in the audience and you have time and you want, please go and get the Niantic Spatial SDK for Quest, use the long distance meshing, and make a wheel appear out of a gymnasium. And then we would love to see it.
And then a field of view simulator on it, right? That's it, right? Then we get the full. Okay, this is how much of the field of view you get in a Quest. This is how much you get in the Magic Leap 1, 2. That's our simulator, so we can put this conversation to bed. Arlen, take care of yourself out there, and the fair crash out. Yeah, I just had a crash out about this, so thank you. And I'm ready to move on to the next subject.
Yeah, there's just one comment I want to bring up just before we move on. And that is James O'Loughlin saying that 70-degree field of view is all you need for see-through AR for a minimum viable product for consumers. And you're right, James. That is what Meta's Orion was. It's also what Magic Leap 2 is. The problem is that Magic Leap 2 does it in this form factor, and this is not a minimum viable product for AR glasses, right? So look at the thickness of this optical stack. That's not something. I think this is a conversation we often have with James. Let's see Magic Leap do it in glasses form factor. The only company that has ever demoed 70-degree field of view see-through AR is in a glasses form factor is Meta. And Meta has admitted that the way they did it was to use an exotic material that has no supply chain, and therefore it would cost north of $10,000 to ship in an actual product. So look, will glass waveguides get the 70-degree field of view? Probably, but not in the first gen. The first generation of products, I'd love to be wrong, by the way. If I'm wrong, amazing. But I think the first generation of transparent AR glasses that we see from Snap and Meta and perhaps Apple, depending on when they decide to ship, they're going to be around 50 to 60 degrees. It's very, very, very hard to do that, to go beyond that in glass without getting to this kind of form factor.
And I will be enjoying my 100 degrees plus forever. All right. Meta.
More than that, because again, diagonal, right? So your Vision Pro is 110 or something like that,
Well, I will be enjoying the field of view that makes me feel present in another place.
Yeah. The dream that people want out of transparent AR is going to arrive through pass-through mixed reality a lot sooner. We keep saying that in this show. There's this mainstream, idea that is the first thing that you come to if you don't really think about it and you don't really understand the underlying technology is that, headsets are just stepping stone to AR glasses, and AR glasses are going to emerge soon and do all of these things that a Vision Pro does. And you even see moronic takes these days of people saying, oh, the Meta Ray-Ban display is just doing everything Vision Pro does in glasses. And if someone says that, they have either never put a Vision Pro on, never put a Meta Ray-Ban display on, or neither. And in most cases, let's be honest, it's neither.
Bar out there asking, why aren't companies spending a few billion to stand up a silicon carbide manufacturing plant for AR glasses? They are absolutely doing that presently. You want to give some caveats to that, David?
I was just going to say it's more like tens of billions, and there are also export control issues. Optical grade silicon carbide is used in certain military sensing systems. So if you use it in the US, trying to export it out is a nightmare. That is a huge, huge issue. And yeah, it's really, really hard. It's like nobody knows how to even do it yet. And like, that's not saying it's impossible, but nobody knows how to do it. This is something that has to be invented. This isn't like, coming up with like a sharper LCD or something like this. This isn't like, making an OLED a little bit brighter. This is like fundamentally new manufacturing. As we pointed out,
Michael Grant, here comes the chart.
We're not going to bring up the chart. We don't have for that. But what I will say is, firstly, my headset is glitching out a little bit, so apologies if my voice does. But what I will say is, Meta grew their optical grade silicon carbide. They grew the crystals in their basement. Okay, every Orion glasses prototype, the crystals were grown in their basement. That's where we are today for silicon carbide. But of course, there is going to be an optical grade silicon carbide supply chain emerge. And one of the things we pointed out is that the Anduril partnership, Palmer Luckey's defense company, is going to be a huge driver because the military want it badly, and it's going to exist first for the military, and then it will trickle down to the consumer market.
Sorry, go ahead. You finished over there? You were glitching a little bit. And
I'm going to restart. I'll be right back.
Yeah, I disconnected earlier when I had that. So Bringhurst saying, it'll always be the thing that prevents us from driving with it. Nobody will trust a display when driving. Really interesting. You trust a display for rear view camera all the time. It's a standard part of driving, and it has been for about a decade now, to have little lines showing you how you're going to back out of your space. There's restrictions on what kind of how fast that feed needs to get you your imagery up to the front of your device. That's augmented reality right there, consumer augmented reality that you use while driving today. Though I do take your overall point, and the thing I want to push back on, and let's go back to Android XR a little bit. Is there a Google employee with the title and the vision to take a Google headset and put it on a person in the back seat of a Waymo car and let the person drive through the past, drive through a city that looks like it did in the Jurassic era, right? Like, you're driving down the street or going down the street in the Jurassic era and seeing dinosaurs at the windows of your car. Can Google pull that off? Can you make VR good enough that it will work in a Waymo car that way? I'd love to see that. But Bringhurst, you're right that I don't see you driving with a headset on, but honestly, why are we driving the cars ourselves anymore? We should that's wasted time. That's what VR is for. All right. Sorry.
We can't get back into the car discussion this week. The one comment I want to bring up is Onakazi saying, yes, at scale, silicon carbide is not mass manufactured. Yes, I'm not saying that no one knows how to make it. I'm saying no one knows how to make it profitably, affordably at scale. As we often say on this show, it's easy to make one of a thing. It's a lot harder to make a million of a thing affordably and at good yield without quality issues. People overvalue invention and undervalue manufacturing.
I just got to say, I think we have a viewer out there about to go to undergo a colonoscopy, and they're still listening to us while about to go under the colonoscopy. So we hail you out there, Arlen. Thank you for taking care of yourself. We hope you're well, and just a recommendation for everyone out there to take care of themselves and get themselves checked out for health reasons.
Okay, let's enter very much so echo that, very much so echo that. Let's enter the final section of our show today. The Meta Reality Labs Restructure and V83 PTC section. So firstly, we will talk about Meta's Q3 earnings. So in their earnings call for Q3 2025, their revenue is up 74% year over year. Reality Labs revenue is up 74% year over year, but there's a reason for that. So first, for context, Reality Labs is the division of Meta behind Quest headsets, Horizon OS, Horizon Worlds, Ray-Ban, Oakley glasses, Meta Neural Band, all of that stuff. It's Reality Labs. It's their XR division, whatever you want to call it. You understand, Reality Labs is the stuff other than, Instagram, Facebook, WhatsApp. So Meta's overall business is, vastly profitable, and you can go and read other outlets and Bloomberg about that. We are just concerned with Meta Reality Labs division for the obvious reason. So bringing up the quarterly revenue here that we're always kind of tracking for Q3, you notice it is 74% higher than for Q3 2024. Now, again, some context here for kind of financial comparisons. We always compare quarter to quarter, as in we compare Q3 of this year to Q3 of last year. That's because so much of this is seasonal. You can see here that Q4, the holiday season, is always the highest by far. So there is a reason, though, that Meta's Q3 revenue is up so much compared to last year's Q3. And you can actually see, if you look at this chart, that this is their second highest Q3 ever. They had a higher Q3 in 2021 when Quest 2 was flying off the shelves. The reason for this, according to Meta CFO, is that retailers are stocking up on Quest headsets, Quest 3S and Quest 3, in time for the holiday season so that they're not out of stock. So last year, Q3 was before Quest 3S launched, right? You can see Quest 3S's launch quarter right here, the largest ever. This was the launch quarter. And so all of the revenue for Quest 3's launch was in Q4. And there were stock issues for people at certain times. For Q3, according to Meta, retailers are trying to get ahead of that by ordering in their stock in advance. And so they are saying to their investors that Q3 includes a lot of headsets that are actually bought in for the holiday season. So that's a massive context here. If you look at Q1 and Q2 of 2025, Q1 was down and Q2 was only slightly up. And in both cases, they said that Quest headset sales were down year over year. And this is something that we reported on. It's a major thing to realize that's happening here, that there is a loss of momentum here. Quest 3S was a massive launch. You can see it here. It's their best ever quarter, but that didn't transfer through into the into the 2025, into the year after, right? 2024 Christmas, a bunch of people bought Quest 3S. It was a massive success. As we reported, it was the highest selling console on Amazon for Christmas 2024. But in 2025, that just has not transferred through to the first two quarters. We'll have to see whether that happens for Q4 2025, right? A lot of this is those Quest headsets being bought in, but do people buy them? This is just retailers buying them right now. It'll be fascinating to see. So Meta CFO did note that they actually expect Q4 to be lower than 2024 because some of this buy-in is from Quest headsets being built into stock, but they do expect strong AI glasses revenue. I'm quoting them directly here. And this is in both of these first quarters of the year, Q1 and Q2, they repeatedly said that it was massive increases in Ray-Ban Meta glasses sales, slightly offset negatively by lower year-over-year Quest headset sales. So part of this, as we've discussed before, is why we expect Meta is making a massive shift in strategy next year. Rather than releasing a traditional Quest 4, we expect that they will release a headset that is much more optimized for media watching, higher priced, right? It's much more about the content and services than just getting sheer scale. We expect it to be somewhere around $1,000. We expect it's focused on, being really, really light and comfortable and having a high quality media experience. But yeah, it'll be absolutely fascinating to see for Q4 what happens. We can't really talk about Q3. This is the irony here is there's nothing really to say because we don't know how much of this is going to just be, stock for Q4. What I do think is really, really interesting from the Reality Labs from the Meta Q3 earnings report is what the CFO, Susan Lee, responded when a Wall Street analyst asked, do you expect to see Reality Labs spending decrease? Because this is just the revenue aspect of Reality Labs. Let's zoom out and look at the costs. Below this red bar, this is how much they spend each quarter. The green bars are how much money they bring in for Reality Labs. And as you can see, since they started breaking out Reality Labs in Q4 2020, Quest 2's launch season, it is a massively unprofitable division. Massively unprofitable. However, the key context that needs to be added to that is that most of this spending is on AR, the research and development of AR glasses, which have not actually launched yet. The Orion project and the project to build real consumer AR glasses out of it is a Manhattan project scale venture. And so just before we get on to the discussion, I just want to bring up what Susan Lee said when asked about, are these red bars going to get smaller in 2026? So Susan Lee said, we're not sharing an outlook for Reality Labs operating losses in 2026, in part because we're still working through the budget plan. What I can say from the process so far is that we're trying to shift momentum towards AI glasses. And that's been one of the biggest priorities looking at Reality Labs' budget and roadmap for 2026. And that is in part because we have seen that there is a lot on demand. I would say we were stocked out multiple times over the course of this year, and we want to get ahead of that, both because there's product market fit and also because it's a great and very natural platform, blah, blah, blah. So that's what we really think we're looking forward to as our highest priority when we think about the 2026 Reality Labs roadmap. And that's from the CFO.
Yeah. What I would love on this chart is to see the revenue from Steam for the same period from VR specifically. We'll never get that chart, but it would be so amazing to see that during this quarter, Valve made $1 billion from VR content. This quarter, they made $500 million from VR content. It would be amazing to see those lined up against each other, to see how much of this spending was absorbed by the content that hits Steam, basically. Like, how much of this spending was basically to pay people to take Quest headsets and then buy content on Steam to play with it.
I mean, I think less than you're suggesting in your kind of implication here, based on the fact that we know that the vast majority of multi-platform VR developers make vastly more money on Quest than they do on PC. That's something that we know, right? So a lot of PC VR usage is VRChat and simulators. And so these people are buying their simulator of choice once, and then maybe, if you include DLC for simulators, sure, maybe it's massive, but VRChat users aren't spending any money on Steam. VRChat's free on Steam, right? So a lot of that is not actually revenue, and I suspect it wouldn't be as big as these figures here. If you talk about like specifically games that are bought for usage on VR on PC, just based on the numbers that we know. But I would love to see that figure too. Absolutely, we would love to get more detailed, granular details on all of this stuff. We're just bringing you the details that we do have publicly available. You're muted, Ian.
We've got 2 or 3 more stories here. I'm looking at the comments. Really good discussion this week. Do hit that like button and consider becoming a member on UploadVR.com.
Yeah, let's get into these other topics here. James O'Loughlin's pointing out they're also spending an enormous amount of money now on AI. And obviously, as we point out all the time, the line between AI and AR and VR is not as delineated as people think. So much of that AI investment is used in Reality Labs. We've seen in some of the memos recently that we're about to discuss, they talk about their fundamental AI research being used in their products. It's why like Quest headsets have, despite being $300 and $500, the best hand tracking, right? Like I tried Galaxy XR's hand tracking. In my experience, in that 25 minutes, it was inferior to Quest 3, right? There are all kinds of kind of computer vision stuff. It's the only headset that does inside out upper body tracking, for example, right? And You don't get the torso and the shoulders and the arms in Galaxy XR or Apple Vision Pro. Meta's the only company doing it, and they're doing it on the weakest chip, right? So you do see these advantages come through. There are obviously other use cases when it comes to the AI glasses and things like that, but I just want to point out on that there's not a huge delineation. Let's quickly talk about Quest V83 PTC. So this is the public test channel build of Horizon OS, the public test channel being the beta release channel of the operating system for Quest headsets that you can opt into. And so right now, in V83 PTC, they have rolled out the evolved Horizon OS system UI, the evolved Navigator UI that they teased at Meta Connect. And so it is somewhat similar to the initial Navigator that they started rolling out to testers all the way back in May, but it's refined and has some key changes. So one of the biggest changes that is something that Quest owners have been asking for years now, since Meta started to put worlds in the library, is that Horizon worlds, destinations, are no longer in your app library. So they now have your app library here. It's the default view. You open it and you get your apps. And just like the initial Navigator rollout, you can pin up to 10 apps. So this is obviously just a marketing example where Meta's pinned these apps, but you can pin whatever 10 apps you want. You can have, as long as my understanding currently is that it's only for store apps. It's not including unknown sources. You have to go over here and click this to bring up unknown sources. But this is the default view, right? You open it. It's obviously clearly very inspired by Vision OS, and Android XR has a similar UI. Compared to the earlier Navigator, they have this kind of interleaved rows where some of them are wider than others, supposed to be to make it more visible, less like a kind of giant just cluster of grids. Vision OS, again, very similar. This kind of triple menu on the side, very inspired by Vision OS. But worlds are now in their own tab down here. So if you don't ever want to see Horizon worlds in your app library, well, you never see them in your app library. But if you never want to see them in this overlay interface, just don't press this button down here with the little globe icon. The other difference is that they now have brought your friends list and your profile into this system level overlay. They are no longer, just 2D apps. They're part of the system level overlay. Other than that, it's just kind of a refined version of Navigator. There are lots of little tweaks. A nice thing is that there's now a double press, the meta button gesture to hide or show all of your windows. So if you are multitasking and you want to quickly get back into your immersive experience, you double tap the meta button here. There are some other, more minor changes here. For example, the scene understanding, we talked about it earlier, can now do slanted roofs and interior walls. They have this beta test of like a web login thing for certain websites that you can use the phone app instead of having to type password into kind of the web browser. A massive disadvantage of Horizon OS is, of course, that you don't have Chrome, you don't have Safari, you have Meta's browser, and Meta's browser isn't available on your other devices. You don't have your passwords, you don't have your bookmarks, you don't have any of it. So Meta's trying to kind of make that more seamless, but right now they say it only supports like TikTok and Roblox or something like that. So I don't know what the wider rollout plan is there. Biggest thing of V83 PTC is this Navigator evolved. I like it. I much prefer to have my apps in front of me and up to 10 pinned. I like that it's an overlay instead of everything being its own little window. It's simple. Fundamentally, what most people want out of these operating system level interfaces is to launch the app or game they want as quickly as possible. You want to play an app, you want to play a game, or you want to use an app, you want to play a game. Don't want to go through menus. You just want to launch the damn app. With this, you open it, you point at the app, and you click it, and it opens. I like it.
I think we've got to talk about the restructure here soon. I noticed restructure was listed in the headline for this one, but it's our last subject. So I'm just going to hold off the restructure discussion because I think there's two sides to take the restructure discussion when we get to it.
Sorry, let's get straight into it then. This is pretty self-explanatory what's happening here. Just to kind of finish this off, it's very inspired by Vision OS, clearly. They're trying to simplify the UI, make it something that isn't so complicated. People have been asking about this for years and years now. just for them to simplify it. Some people will have some issues with things changing. As always, every new system UI, there's always people that don't like it, and you're entitled to your view. I think this is a lot simpler and easier than the old UI. Fundamentally, just to explain why I think that, it's having all of the system primary interfaces and interactions as an overlay on top of your windows and apps, whereas previously there was every system interface, including the quick settings, including the library, was just another 2D window. So it would get in the way of your other 2D windows, your actual windows, like your browser windows and things like that. And also, it would cause them to shift around. It would mean that they contribute to your maximum number of windows, right? So if you've opened quick settings and the app library, that counts to 2 of your windows. That was an absurd design. I hated that. I'm really glad that this is all an overlay. I just want to launch an app. I don't want to shuffle around all my windows. With Navigator, you open it, you click it, you're done. And yeah, you're pointing at feed, but you know what you can do? You can long press and unpin it. You can unpin the feed. You can have virtual desktop, Steam Link, whatever game you want to play. You can have up to 10 pinned apps, which means you can have all of these plus all of these and one of these, and only 3 of them will be here as your recent apps.
All right. Yeah, I appreciate the unpin. We'll see how long that lasts before it just reappears on the homepage again.
James O'Loughlin said, the first question to ask when evaluating a design is what problem does this solve, not whether you like it or not. I like it because it solves the problem that my windows get shifted around if system elements are 2D windows. The analogy I use here is the start menu. When you press the start menu on your Windows PC, it's an overlay on top of your windows, right? It pops out from the start menu and it lets you launch apps. It's not, you don't press the start menu and another window opens with all of your like pinned apps and stuff there. That's not a good UI design. That's bad. It's like the system UI should not just be another window. That's the reason.
So DCM out there asking, I wonder if you can sideload Chrome. Well, that is the issue you have with sideloading anything onto the Quest ecosystem. If it requires Google services, you might be in trouble. Now, what's going to be interesting over this next period is if you could have an APK that you could install on the Samsung Galaxy XR or on the Quest headset or any assortment of other devices out there. What services are buried inside of the app? Do you just download an empty app that immediately gives you a QR code, or how do you log in on headset is already a pain in the butt. And if you make it so that all of your APKs or all of your apps require you to log in first, you're actually throwing up a ton of friction in front of the developer and in front of the user in just trying to use something cool in VR with other people. So it's a very nasty issue coming up here of just what does software look like that runs on every device available to you?
Yeah, just to be crystal clear, no, you cannot sideload Chrome for the reason that Ian gave. A bunch of Android apps that are on your Android phone use this system level runtime called Google Play Services. And you have to understand that there's Android and there's Android. And that sounds silly to say, but there's the Android open source project, AOSP, and that's what Fire OS is built off, Horizon OS, Pico OS, Play for Dreams OS, the Android open source project core. And then there's Googleified Android, and it has all of Google services plus literally something called Google Play Services, this runtime. So Chrome requires it, a bunch of Google apps required, but not only that, because it's an API for developers, a bunch of apps that are on the Google Play Store require it. So, quantifying it is hard, but there's a good chunk of apps that are on Android phones that you can not sideload on a Quest, but you can sideload on your Galaxy XR because it has Google Play Services. Yeah. And so the biggest issue with logins is your browser, right? It comes back to this ecosystem thing. If you're an iPhone user that uses Safari, then you get a Vision Pro and all of your Safari bookmarks and passwords and logins are all there on Vision Pro. It's just there. It just works, right? If you're an Android user, or even if you're an iPhone user that uses Chrome, or wherever you use Chrome on all your devices, you get a Galaxy XR, you open Chrome, and because you've signed into your Google account, it's all there, all your passwords, all of that. Now, there's obviously a group, most people use the password manager built into their browser/OS, but other people use a third-party one. And something that Meta is testing with some users is bringing vastly more password managers to their browser. So right now they have LastPass for everyone, but this test that we've seen screenshots from multiple users now includes Bitwarden, what's the other one? Dashlane, Proton Pass,
I don't see one password
NordPass.
on that list, though.
Sorry?
I don't see one password. Doesn't appear to be.
No, I don't see it on that list, unfortunately. And this is something that Meta's obviously going to have to make partnerships with each company. But right now, this is the ones that we see in this screenshot. And right now, to be clear, most people only have LastPass. This is a very small rollout, as far as you can see. It's a massive issue that we keep bringing up: Meta's lack of ecosystem integration. My suggestion for this was that Meta should partner with a browser, right, like Microsoft Edge or something, and just give up on its own browser. There's arguments about why maybe WebXR would be harmed by that. Maybe you could just say Meta should just, if they're serious about being a platform, release the Horizon OS browser for your phone and PC, right? Like, everyone's making a browser these days. ChatGPT just being a browser, right? You might as well. If you're a hardcore Horizon OS user, like, most people aren't going to, but if you're a hardcore Quest user, at least Meta should let you. It's based on Chromium anyway. All of these browsers are. Almost every browser in the world is based on Chromium. So
that's what the commenters were bringing up. Was people bringing up Chromium as that is the line where you can go and sideload, where it's right on the line of Google services not included, but like one step over, and now you got Chrome, and now it's not. Yeah.
But this is Chromium as well, so that's not getting you any advantage, right? So, but I think a really interesting comment here from GeekChap, and we have reported on this, is that if you use Firefox, you can actually get your synced passwords and bookmarks on Quest through Wolvik, which is an open source revival of Firefox Reality that has Firefox login. So this is available on the Horizon store. You'll notice in some of my screenshots and some of my articles, because I like to play around with Wolvik. It's cool to have another browser on Quest. Wolvik, if you're a Firefox user, you can get. So yes, that's right. But maybe Meta should partner with Firefox, on a first-party basis and things like that. I see someone said that their ears bled to the idea of partnering with Microsoft Edge. I sympathize, but I was just making an example. They have to pick someone. They already have a massive Microsoft partnership. You're muted, Ian. Ian, you're muted.
What was that, David? I got distracted for a sec.
I just said they already have a massive Microsoft partnership for Windows 11 integration, for Xbox Cloud Gaming, for search on Meta AI. If you ever asked Meta AI something and it's a search, it's using Bing search. So you could extend that partnership to Edge, and then at least you have Windows to Quest, at least.
Yeah. We'll see how this all develops. The browser is incredibly important to all of these companies. We see you, WebXR people out there in the audience. I felt bad when I was asked by Alex if I had run a WebXR game inside of Android XR, and I'm like, oh, no, I didn't. I didn't think to go to the WebXR website, and I should have tried to run a WebXR experience, but I don't know. That wasn't super relevant to my let's see if this can stand on its own question. But we see you WebXR folks out there waiting for your time to shine, and like some browser is going to be home to some of your ideas. We ready to talk about the next one?
Yeah, I mean, look, in fairness to Meta, they are one of the fastest companies to implement WebXR standards in their browser. Like Meta's browser is probably the best WebXR browser out there at the moment. So, again, what they lose in existing ecosystem integration, they gain in kind of leaning into their advantages and leaning into XR, AR, VR. So, yeah. Let's talk about our final topic then, which is kind of very relevant to the Horizon OS UI thing, which is that just as you see Horizon World separated out from the app library in the UI, something very similar has happened to Reality Labs' organizational structure. So this comes from a memo leaked to Business Insider, an internal Meta memo. where Andrew Bosworth describes the stats of change. So before this change, the structure of Reality Labs, as I mentioned earlier in the show, was Metaverse and wearables. Those were the two top level orgs within the Reality Labs division. Metaverse and wearables. And Metaverse was everything from Quest headsets to Horizon Worlds to Horizon OS to, Deadpool VR. All that is in Metaverse, was in Metaverse. And then wearables is what you would expect, right? Ray-Ban Meta Neural Display, or Meta Neural Band, Meta Ray-Ban Display. Very easy to understand. So what's the news? The news is that they have taken Horizon OS out of Metaverse and into its own third top level org. So now it's no longer Metaverse and wearables. It's Metaverse, Horizon OS, and wearables. So there's now an organizational level detachment between the kind of Horizon OS Quest headset stuff and the Horizon World stuff, just as we see that UI level detachment. And we're kind of drawing an analogy. You can argue it's a little bit of a stretch, but I think it actually is kind of very relevant to see what's happening here.
So let's say next quarter, Meta yeets the Horizon OS division into the sun. What is it left with?
I think that's very speculative, and it's like if you look at
what it's left with, if that happened, not whether it'll happen.
I mean, there's crazy hypotheticals. I just want to first point out that the memo is more defending the other way around. The memo, if you read it, it's on UploadVR via Business Insider. It's almost Bosworth trying to say this doesn't mean we're killing the Metaverse one. It's not that the Horizon OS one. It's if you look at what's happening here, this is an elevation of the Horizon OS group. They're going up. They're going from a sub org to a primary org. You could, again, this is getting into speculative. It's almost like they don't trust the Metaverse part to control the Horizon OS part. That's not, so to me, you don't take something out of an org and give it its own top level org and mean that the Horizon OS leader now reports directly to Bosworth, not through the Metaverse team. I don't see that happening as, to me, what I think this is, it's a response to Android XR. It's a realization that Quest cannot be completely entangled with the Horizon Worlds, that Horizon Worlds has a massive branding problem. It has a massive reputation problem. You don't want to stake your reputation there, especially if you're trying to get headset makers to adopt this instead of Android XR. You put it forward as a general purpose computing platform, not as Horizon World slop when you're trying to get Lenovo and Asus and other companies to build a headset on it instead of going to Google and adopting Android XR. That's what I think is going on here.
I'm sorry, just wearables doesn't include Quest?
Correct. Wearables is the glasses and the neural band.
So what is the Metaverse inside of Meta? What does that division consist of if it's not Quest and it's not Horizon OS? Sorry, explain it to me.
Horizon Worlds and the content, the software.
So Horizon Worlds and the content and software are now the Metaverse, and the operating system is separate. So
yes.
They could yeet the Metaverse section and keep the operating system.
I don't think they're eating any of them. I think they're just making them separate things.
But I'm trying to understand how they've got 3 reports to Andrew Bosworth instead of 2, is what you're saying.
Correct.
Okay. And that's 3 people to answer for the bad performance of the company instead of 2, or the good performance of the company instead of 2.
I was going to say the wearables team is getting all the gold stars. They're selling the glasses,
and it doesn't have Quest in it. No, it does have.
Wearables does not. So wearables is glasses and wristband. Horizon OS.
What the F am I wearing right now, David?
Okay, that's a semantics point. I'm not here to defend.
Oh man! All right, Arlen. I hope you're doing okay out there, Arlen. Talking about the semantics debate. That's all I have to hold on to. That's my reality, David.
I just want to make this crystal clear for the audience. Before this week, Metaverse and wearables. Wearables is glasses and wristband. Metaverse is everything else. Okay, that's before this week. The change this week is that they take the Horizon OS part of Metaverse and pull it up into its own top-level org. So you now have Metaverse, Horizon OS, and wearables. Again, you can read the memo from Bosworth on UploadVR.com via Business Insider.
Okay. I mean, you guys are all trying to observe it as a good thing or a bad thing. And all I'm going to say is if it was working well before, you wouldn't have done the restructure, right?
Agreed.
All right.
Agreed. I think no, but I agree with you that it's trying to solve a problem, and I think the problem is that Horizon Worlds is too intertangled with Horizon OS as a platform. And if you're, I'm just going to pick a random company out of the cloud here, LG, right? I'm just again ignore. I'm not making a specific conversation about LG. I'm just saying if you're a hardware maker that makes hardware and you want to make a headset and you're deciding, do I go with Meta Horizon OS or do I go with Google Android XR? You want as Meta, they want to gear up to be ready for this competition. They want to say, here's our top level org that does this, that provides this platform for your headset, and not have to deal with a person whose primary concern is Horizon Worlds on smartphones. Like it makes sense that these are different things, right? Like the person who is most thinking about how do you get more smartphone users to play Horizon Worlds should not be the same person who's deciding what to do next with Horizon OS and Quest hardware. That's what I think this org is saying.
It makes sense, but it's what I'm is it too little too late is sort of the question. And like who thought the previous system was the right thing? Like who thought that linking your Facebook account to your Quest usage was a good idea and was told, by everyone, I don't want to do this. And like here we are all these years later and they're like shuffling the decks again to just give another leader a chance to right this ship. When at some point, like there have been indications from Bosworth himself that like we have to do it this year or major sections of our strategy have failed. Like I think he said that in his memo last year, didn't he?
Yeah, but we have that debate about whether it was a rallying cry to try and get the troops kind of in order. Look, I agree with you that fundamentally that you don't do something like this if everything isn't going well, right? They're
Yeah.
obviously, but we reported also like on Bloomberg's coverage about 6 months ago, Apple made a massive shift in their organization because Siri was such a big priority that they needed to move people off Vision OS and onto Siri. They had to, the guy, Mike Rockwell, who was the primary to getting Vision Pro out the door, is now tasked of please save us from the embarrassment of not shipping the advanced Siri that we promised the world. These companies do this if they think something's going wrong. And I think we're both in agreement that something is obviously going wrong with this. We just talked about it in those reports. Quest headsets are not selling other than at Christmas. They have only been able to deliver a product that goes under the Christmas tree. They haven't been able to deliver a product that sells throughout the rest of the year. So obviously something's gone wrong there. And now they're facing competition from Google. They want to try and build up a third-party ecosystem. You don't want to try and force your Horizon World slop into that. This is only our speculation. Maybe this isn't the case, but this is just what I'm seeing here.
And the competitor has, Samsung and Google, two of the largest technology companies on the planet, have an open bootloader that can run APKs. And who wants to install Horizon OS as the alternative operating system to Android XR? Not me, not right now, right? Like, and not. There's a long road to go.
Sure, but if you want to make a gaming headset, our understanding is that the Asus headset is for gamers. If you wanted to pick a headset for only gaming right now, and you're a VR gamer, and we're not talking about a PC. Remember, the majority of Quest users have never connected their headset to a PC. If you want to choose a headset for standalone VR gaming, would you choose Quest 3 or Galaxy XR? We both know the answer.
What a fascinating question, because I invest in ecosystems over the way they will grow over the course of 2 to 3 years.
Sure.
So you're asking like right now, which is better? Hands down, Quest 3 easy. But that's not how I make my purchasing choices.
Yeah, but most people buy the console to play games today. Like they don't want to get the headset that doesn't have the games they want to play.
You also buy the console for the game that's announced 6 months to a year down the road.
Sure, with the caveat that there's a massive backwards compatibility, right? So PlayStation 5, you on launch didn't have many games, but you could play all your PS4 games, right? There is no equivalent here. Like if you're a VR gamer, a standalone VR gamer, we don't really talk about standalone VR gamers enough in this podcast, but it's the primary usage of Quest is people playing standalone
David,
VR games.
Walkabout Mini Golf and Stardew Valley are two of the games I've poured hundreds of hours into. Like, they're up there in probably my top 5, period. And they're there day one on the system.
Sure.
I don't really need Beat Saber.
Okay.
I don't really need Arkham. I don't really need those games. And
you don't. But most people look at when people are playing on Quest. Look at the most popular.
It's size of the pies, right? Like there's this many Stardew Valley players, and there's this many people who like Arkham Shadow.
Sure, but you're talking about Stardew Valley, the utility value of playing Stardew Valley in a headset versus on a screen. For us, we see that utility value, and over time, it obviously gets bigger. But for a lot of people, putting on a headset that is we discussed in our hands-on is not necessarily even comfortable for them to play Stardew Valley that they've played on their PC and on their Switch. The utility, the difference is that you can only play Beat Saber and Arkham Shadow and Asgard's Wrath and Deadpool VR coming up, and all these games that just launched. Only play them in VR. You can't Stardew Valley on almost every device that exists.
Yes, but also like there's so many things to talk about here. But like multitasking is a huge area that all these platforms are trying to solve in one way, shape, or another. And yes, I'm not typical here. I'm a very different sort of person as in my usage, in my ways of using these devices. But it's part of it is like I'm always trying to represent a different segment of the audience that isn't currently represented. And yeah, like all these VR games are great and standalone, but I don't know. The ones that bring me back to my headset are usually multi-platform. They're like they're on other devices. Arkham Shadow, and I don't hear people going, I actually put 400 hours into Asgard's Wrath 2. Like that wasn't an RPG that took that amount of time out of.
It took 60 hours though. It was about 60 hours. Was it?
And what is the completion rate? I would like to know how many hundreds of people did that.
Go and look at, it's more than hundreds. It's more than hundreds. Look at Steam's achievements. Very few people actually complete a lot of flat screen games. Like I'm not talking about VR, I'm talking about flat screen. That's a thing all over. Most people that buy a video game never complete it. That's just the reality of video gaming. But it's not just one game. It's the sum of all of the games, right? Again, the vast majority of Quest usage is playing these VR games. Like that's also I'm saying. I'm not saying that you can't have other use cases and markets for it. I'm just saying that's this conversation started with why would someone pick Horizon OS? Well, Asus, who wants to make a gaming headset for gamers, is going to pick it because it has 100 times the games.
I don't know if I can. There's a scenario where I'm playing Walkabout Mini Golf and I've got Stardew Valley floating up in front of me as a flat screen window, and I'm playing both at the same time. I'm going golfing.
Well, you can't do that on Android XR, and you can do that on Quest if you're streaming Stardew Valley from a PC.
And I've done VRChat in VRChat, right? I've did that Quest example on Quest where I had the Quest version, the immersive Quest version of VRChat, and then floating within Quest, I had the flat screen APK version of VRChat, and I was in the same instance interacting with both simultaneously. It was a wildly weird experience. But I want to have inside of Walkabout Mini Golf, there's other mini games inside of the game now that have slowly slid in to the ecosystem. There's slingshots on some courses, and I've heard rumor of more things coming. But like that's actually the model, right? I would actually like a space that has bunches of games within it that are all much lower intensity than the core game of like what mini golf isn't an intense game, but it's still best played standing up and golfing when there's a bunch of games I can just sit back and punch the open air here or interact with cubism items right in front of me. There's lots of little things like that that can exist in VR, and I would love to have those. Like I would like to see great places get even richer with better things to do in those locations.
I mean, yeah, it's all about developer time and resources. I'm sure they want to keep adding more stuff. Really interesting comment from James O'Loughlin, who has gone and found the Steam completion rate for Half-Life Alyx. You want to, without looking at the comments, or did you see it already?
No, I didn't. Completion rate for Half-Life Alyx.
What percentage of people who bought
Half-Life? A percentage?
It's a percentage of how many percentage of people who bought Half-Life Alyx completed it.
4%.
Oh, that's okay. It's higher than that. It's 28%.
So one third?
Well,
One
yeah.
third of people completed Half-Life Alyx?
I mean, yeah.
Get me the Arkham Shadow number on that. I would like to see the Arkham Shadow. Come on, let's go call up Camouflage and
I'd
say
love to if they
Camouflage.
tell us. If they tell
Yeah,
us, I would love
I
to
know,
report
right?
that figure. Please do. I would love that. I don't think they're going to tell us, but I would love to know.
I would love to know that too. I think we've got a great show here. Thank you to our audience. Please become a member or a patron over on uploadvr.com. Thank you to our YouTube supporters. And we've got a few more comments I think we'll close out on here.
I want to bring up because D1360 keeps commenting it and we want to respond to you. You know, you clearly want this brought up. There's two questions they have, or statements maybe. One was they're musing, would Meta ever give up Horizon OS and put on Android XR? No, is the answer. They would rather exit the space. I can tell you that very clearly. They would rather exit the space. They don't want to just make a headset. They want to make a platform. All these companies want to be the store you use, the account you log in with. They would rather exit the space than use Android XR. So that's the answer to that. The other one is I'm seeing D1360 say that one of Google's pitches is that Android XR runs on the headsets and glasses. And you have hit on one of my pet peeves because no, it does not. Google uses the phrase Android XR to talk about the headsets and glasses, but they are actually completely different operating systems, completely different. If you get Walkabout Mini Golf, it will not run on your glasses. It's obvious to think, but even like the YouTube app, the Google Maps app, none of that is going to run on the Gemini smart glasses. They are completely different. And in fact, internally, they call them differently. There's Android XR and Android Micro XR. It's as silly as saying that the iPhone and the Apple Watch run the same OS. Like it's as silly as if Apple said the Apple Watch runs iOS. It's all iOS, and it's like no, it doesn't. It obviously doesn't. Anyone who's used the Android XR glasses will tell you it doesn't run the same thing as the Galaxy XR. It's not the same store. It doesn't run APKs. They are literally just the Meta Ray-Ban display concept, but with Google software. It's much more like a smartwatch than like a computer. So this we hate misleading company statements on this podcast and on UploadVR. We will always tell you when these companies are lying to you. Meta does it, Apple has done it, Google does it. At some point, all of these companies will put marketing fluff over reality, and we're here to tell you when they do it.
What'll happen is that you've got such markedly different hardware, only a subset of Google's APIs will be runnable at any one time on glasses. So you can imagine
But it's not even that.
location.
There are no third-party apps on the glasses. They're like people have used these. There's no store. It's just it's like a smartwatch. It's like having a Fitbit.
It's probably only space for Google's product, Google services is where I was going with it. There's space in there for Maps to tell you where you're going, and maybe Gemini to answer questions. The same things that Meta's trying to do over in Meta glasses, but there's no space there for what magically used to be, and like augmented reality and space for your Android apps. Like you're not getting a big Android app in a little itty bitty display that's just about this big in your field of vision. It's not the same thing.
Yeah,
so you could get a map there though. You could see a globe in your next turn by turn direction.
You can see the turn by turn directions, but the reason you don't see the 3D globe rendered in high quality is because of the compute. Remember prototype. The other thing as well is using the unshippable prototype, the unshippable exotic lenses. There's a third component here, the compute puck. Orion is doing this kind of high fidelity apps, high fidelity for glasses, apps running in 6DoF space because it's all being rendered on a compute puck. These Meta Ray-Ban display glasses that you have and the Google equivalents that are going to be coming from third-party companies, they're trying to do all of this in a glasses arm. They are more equivalent computationally to a smartwatch than a headset. Meta's trick that we think they're going to use for their AR glasses product too is going to be a compute puck. Now you can imagine doing that with a smartphone. Of course, there are other ways you can start to kind of handle that with a smartphone. that then kind of trades off against, do you want this product to be standalone usable without a smartphone, which is a interesting proposition. There are other kind of questions there. Do you want a mode that it can work with smartphone or without, with Compute Puck, without? There are lots of interesting design trade-offs here.
James sent me this link and I saw it myself on Reddit. I loved it. I almost shared it with my whole Vision Pro chat group. But someone had taken a Bluetooth media controller, like a little button size, about this size, Bluetooth media controller with play, pause, volume up, volume down, I think next track and backtrack in a little circle. And they had glued it onto the battery pack for the Vision Pro. And so you hold your battery pack in your hand and you've got play and pause controls directly on your battery pack because of this little cheapo Bluetooth controller. I love that idea. I noticed on there's an accessory that Apple sells right now. It's like $150. And there's a third-party version of it, or there's a cheaper version of it. But it's a camera grip for the iPhone, and it gives you the whole the satisfying gripping sensation you would have with an SLR camera. And then the button on it is the shutter button, connects to the shutter on your phone, so you can press the button and it activates the shutter. But you're basically spending $150 for a dedicated physical button that feels pretty close to one if you had an SLR camera. I think it's hysterical. You could spend $20 to get like a physical control for a bunch of your items on your battery pack. Wild ideas here where we're going. Any final comments to talk about?
Yes. So firstly, James O'Loughlin has said that they typed the wrong percentage there for Alex. It's actually 24%. So it's 24%. So it's closer to a quarter. There's another comment here from Not Suspicious asking, why is the Samsung Galaxy XR not as compact as a big screen Beyond? And that, they said, they just want to kind of understand this on a fundamental level. So the reason there is that Galaxy XR has a full computer in the visor, right? The external puck that goes down to your pocket or beside you is only the battery. Inside here, you have the Snapdragon XR2 Plus Gen 2 chipset, the RAM, the storage, the Wi-Fi antennas, all of that stuff is here, and the cooling fans, which are a big part of the weight here as well. So that is a big answer to your question. To be frank, it's not that huge. It's a relatively light headset in my experience. Ian can talk more about this. He spent more time, but you have a full computer here, or I should say, a tablet plus cooling fans.
Yeah, it's a lot of pressure on your face over time. If you don't get this fitting right, it took me an hour and a half to get the fitting right per what the designers designed it for. But this is why I left. I'm going to leave that commentary to David, and I'll be able to edit with him as he goes through it and say what my experience was relative to him, and that's how you get the most hands-on time we could possibly manage into these headsets. Both of our perspectives reflected. It'll be all David's words with a little bit of my feedback, and then you'll get a really balanced breakdown of how comfortable this is based on how it fit on two faces. But gosh, you can put on the little side eyeline things here. The thing that bothers me about this is there are Big Screen Beyond has no platform that they're weighing you down on their face with, that they're weighing you down on your face with. They have left their entire platform inside the PC, sitting there over there with you. They've outsourced the tracking or in base stations around the corner, in the corners of the room. There's not even built-in audio into the headset itself. There's no weight over speakers. When the designs that you're seeing here in Galaxy XR and you see in Vision Pro, very much it's like, we need to put everything we are as a company into this thing. And it somehow ends up being weighty. Big Screen is like the opposite. We're actually a VR-centric company. We're going to go with every gram matters and shave off every single thing so that you're in VR as long as you possibly can be, as immersed as you can be. And again, all this is conceptual. This isn't based on hands-on time with Big Screen Beyond 2 yet. We're pursuing that. I did a like a review in progress of Big Screen Beyond 1, but I found that it was such a mismatch for my eyes. It became really hard to follow through and do a full breakdown when like every moment I'm in it is a mismatch for my IPD. These latest designs, right? Like they're trying to fit every face with every one of their services, and it is equating to weight on the front of your face. Big Screen is going with such a different approach where they're taking pieces from Valve, they're taking their software inside the PC, and they're trying a completely different approach because they have to ultimately. That's the only way they can compete with the likes of this.
Yep. They're carving on a niche, and I mean, we have to mention the obvious trade-off is that you need to have the gaming PC and the base stations and the controllers, but that has massive advantages for ergonomics for sure.
I think that's it for us. This is a happy Halloween from us to you from UploadVR. I almost went out and tried to switch into my Stranger Things outfit because I noticed our commenter said we should have dressed up for Halloween in here. I also like my little suit and how silly professional it is to try to look like this in VR. We've got November coming up after this, and November means Black Friday. That means that anyone that has hardware in the market is going to try to sell that hardware to you with all sorts of deals. So that's also true of software getting released. We have a crazy schedule of trying to review all the software that's coming up, the hardware, bringing you all the latest. Bookmark uploadvr.com, become a member or a patron to support our work. We are a very, very small team trying to cover the future of personal computing. So thank you, David, for all the incredible work. Thank you for the studio. Thank you for our audience for the incredibly engaging conversation. And I can't wait to talk to you guys next time.
Thanks so much, everyone. Great to have the conversation as usual. We'll see you next week, and we'll see you in the future.